Okay, sweet. Well, I'm not going through my phone. I don't know what happened to my iPad. I took a bunch of notes just so
Oh
we
no,
can.
yeah, you're good. You're good
Okay.
to go.
Um, so, anyways, I think my goal with the podcast and having you on is number one. My wife and I get a ton of questions about peptides, and they've benefited me a lot in my life, and also my wife. She's and she was never really a person that would work out or took her up till she was had a kid and actually saw like hormone disruption and all this other stuff to actually start taking care of herself.
For sure.
She just number one, she was just thin and for some reason just never really had to. But now she sees the value and she's repaired her shoulder with BPC.
Yeah.
She just ordered, I think, Epithalon. She wants to start that, but she's a big believer now. And so I think that us getting the information out there to people, especially to, our following and the listeners that have questions, I think a good way to do it today would be actually just go in alphabetical order
For sure.
through some of the main peptides.
Yeah.
And then that way, if somebody needs to come back and listen to it, they can just kind of skip back and go, oh, that is, my friend told me about that. Let me go back and just get that exact information. And then we can probably go into, some of the, what a beginner should do and what an intermediate should do. And, some of your protocols that you probably recommend. But that was kind of my idea for the podcast.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I can give them, or you guys can just send it back to the audience. I can just give them a PDF of the peptides book.
Okay.
So a lot of these things will be, from a dosing standard, because a lot of that's the one thing that, people ask me, like, I don't have a complete, photographic understanding of like what are the dosages, and obviously dosages are dependent based on the critical, need of that person, or if they have acute injury versus just a latent injury, or they want to do maintenance or something like that. So I mean, obviously I have a comprehensive, detailed knowledge of all of them, but as far as like, that's the one thing I was going to tell you last night is like, don't ask me dosing for every single one of them, because I don't want to like get so deep into the weeds, because it might not apply to some people.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And that's why I kind of wanted to go through all of them in alphabetical order, because a lot of them aren't going to pertain to anyone.
Exactly.
But everyone, I guess, has almost a little bit different issue that they're dealing with or trying to fix, outside of some of the main ones. And so that was the whole reason of going through all of them. So I guess first, let's start with, what is a peptide for people that are just now hearing about them or don't know much about them yet?
So peptides are signaling molecules, or what I like to call fractionated proteins. And basically they're organically created in the human body. However, when we use them, when we inject them or we swallow them or we snort them intranasally, they are synthetically manufactured.
Okay.
But I mean, again, they've been around since humans were humans. It wasn't until like probably the 1920s and 1930s where we really started figuring out what peptides were. And, overseas, Russia, the Russians have been using peptides and bioregulators like clinically, scientifically for close to 65 years.
Okay.
So they have detailed research and documents and peer review on them. In the States, in the West, most people started finding familiarity in the clinical space with peptides in about 2016, 2017. That's when it really picked up. I personally have been using peptides since 2004, and I call it the underground, the bodybuilding performance enhancement community. People were using peptides as far back as like probably when I started, because I first started using therapeutic testosterone in 1999, beginning of 2000. And then those same people that were like going down that pathway, were exposed to peptides. In fact, my first foray into peptides was from a company here in Texas called Southern Research Company, and they were selling Ipamorelin. And so like, there's a lot of guys, there'll probably be people in your audience that will hear that and they'll be like, oh, Southern Research Company. There's an interesting story about that as I was talking to you last night about it. But yeah, since 2004. So in 2004, all the way up until now, and obviously until 2023, when I wrote my book, I was always dabbling in them, but I wasn't, pontificating or writing about them. And so I started getting heavily involved in writing about peptides, I want to say in about 2020, 2021. And then my audience and some of my inner circle was like, dude, you know so much about them, you got to write a book on them. But I was always kind of reluctant because, again, it was kind of like a gray area, as it is now, even with the FDA now.
Yeah, it's still kind of an odd place where we're at, where I guess they are naturally occurring in the human body, but in America, I think they're becoming a lot more popular.
Yes.
And, definitely a lot of people do want to make them, I guess, more available to the public. Yes. And so hopefully that happens here in the near future.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the truth is that peptides treat or seek out the fundamental root cause of disease and disorder and dysregulation. So when you use a peptide, if you use it, judiciously in a surgically precise way, you can pretty much heal yourself. You can treat symptomology that Otherwise, it's very difficult to treat with, let's say, like allopathic or what I like to call Rockefeller petroleum distillate medications, which is what mostly the drugs that come from big pharma and sick care medicine are. So again, if they're used clinically and they're used in precise dosage and hopefully under the care and guidance of a doctor who understands what they're doing, they're profound in their ability to heal.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, that's the whole basis of functional medicine, right?
Yeah.
Is like prevent,
Exactly.
try to find the root cause, and don't just, go in and treat the sick.
Exactly.
So that's cool. So what about a bioregulator? Because I kind of just recently heard about them. I don't know much about them. I've never, taken any of them yet, but just a general overview of that too, for people out there that, what the difference in is a bioregulator than a peptide.
Yeah, so there's very little difference. So bioregulators are manufactured and patented in Russia and basically in the Eastern Bloc. And they've been used for close to 60, 65 years, maybe even a little bit longer. And they were pioneered and patented by a doctor by the name of Viktor Kavinson. And so his Russian bioregulators, patented Russian bioregulators, were the first ones that were pushed into the West. And that is really, Sean, only happened in the last 3 years. So if you're in the quote unquote peptide or the pharmaceutical or maybe even just the formulation side of things, and you were like, say, a biochemical engineer, which I happen to be friends with a lot of those guys, they all knew about bioregulators, but it was kind of like hush hush because we knew that they were not allowed into the West. And as I was telling you last night in our conversation, something happened in the war between the Ukraine and Russia and the United States and whatever else is going on over there. And we believe that a lab was blown up. And once that lab was blown up, it obviously was a massive manufacturing plant. Bioregulators started making their way into the United States. And now here we have a bunch of companies and resellers and wholesalers that are selling them. But to answer your question, bioregulators are a little bit different from peptides in that they actually are tissue specific. And so when you take a bioregulator, and as you know, and probably most of your audience that is familiar with bioregulators, and by the way, it's still a small percentage of people, they're oral capsules for the most part. And when you take them, they target specific biological systems and organs. And when you also swallow them orally, they have this incredible ability to not cause side effects because, again, they specifically target that individual organ system or biological system. So they're pretty amazing. And as you get older, as people are aging, you can use bioregulators, to basically, let's say, improve or maintain, your prostate, your thymus gland, your heart pathways, your brain, your kidneys. I mean, I can go on and on. Everything. There's a bioregulator specifically for almost every organ and biological system in the body.
So in theory, you would maybe use one of these for a short duration of time just to kind of prevent something from happening over time, like men and, I guess, prostate. So
exactly,
the example could be used, once a year or once every couple of years, they would maybe use something like this.
And that's the cool part about them is that the Russians have given or advocated like dosing protocols for them. So like, for example, it's a perfect one to talk about is for prostate, right? Like every man at 50, your prostate, it really starts earlier, but your prostate starts hypertrophies, becoming bigger. And when that happens, obviously it pushes pressure on your urethra and it slows down your urine volume and your stream and stuff like that. It causes issues. It can even also make you wake up once or twice in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, which is obviously frustrating for deep sleep and all that kind of stuff. But
sure,
you can take
every guy has that problem.
Every guy has a problem. But the reality is that you can start using Libidon, which is the bioregulator for the prostate. There's another one too, but Libidon is the most well known and the one that's most available. And you can probably take 2 or 3 10-day courses in a course of a year, and it will definitely help in reducing the size of the prostate, but more importantly, it actually improves the function of the prostate so that from a hormonal standpoint, you are more optimized endocrine from an endocrine system standpoint. So a lot of guys who use that will talk about better erections. They'll talk about like having better staying power. So again, it's really weird. I don't think we really truly understand what the prostate does other than, its vestigial organ aspect of like, oh, it gets bigger and it causes us to not be able to, have a stronger urine stream. But I think there's a lot of things the prostate is involved in with male sexual health and function.
Yeah, no, I think we're in the, like we were talking about last night, I think we're kind of in this like golden age of, there's going to be a lot of cool stuff that comes out over the next 5 or 10 years. And it might already be out. It's just the awareness and the research, I guess, isn't quite caught up yet. And so again, I think we're one generation away of like people just living an incredible life.
100%.
But
Maybe less than a generation, maybe in
I
the
think
next
so.
5 to 10 years.
I guess I think with like the whole political environment and how much it's going to take to actually get everything out there, then that's, I guess, why I say one generation.
Yeah.
And, maybe
no, I'm in total agreement with you. The corruption is so systemic and so deep. It's just going to take time for it to be
that's what I
rooted
think.
out.
Yeah. And to get all these things that are available now out to the public where the awareness is out there, a lot of doctors do know about this stuff, and they are, kind of behind the camera and behind the scenes. They're users themselves, and they heavily promote them, but just the environment today, it's just hard for them to.
Well, as I was telling you, I'm partners now in a new company called BioLongevity Labs, and our goal, and it's not really a goal, it's pretty much a guarantee it's going to happen, is to really bring bioregulator awareness to the general public, to the mainstream. Because the good thing about bioregulators that separates them from peptides is there's not as much of a gray area from a regulation standpoint, right? So the FDA, Big Pharma, the AMA, whatever other alphabet that's involved in governing medicine sees them as supplements.
Okay.
So you can sell them on Amazon or DTC or DTB, D2B. I mean, it doesn't matter, with no restrictions or regulations. Now, that's not to say that they may not find out at some point. They're like, oh, wait a minute, we got to restrict these things because these things work similar to medicines or to drugs. But at this point right now, there is no issue. And so, my goal with this company is to expose it to the world, to have mass distribution. Because as I was telling you last night, the biggest issue right now we have with bioregulators is supply chain.
Okay.
Because again, the Cavinson bioregulators, which are the patented form coming from Russia, are limited due to the war. And there is now other companies, which we don't have to mention, but they're getting into the space because Dr. Cavinson died actually in January. It's almost now 2 years. It's crazy. He died in January of 2023. And since then, his son has been involved in taking the patents and relicensing them and giving other people the right to the product. So it's good and bad. It's good in that there'll be more supply chain. It's bad in that, who knows the quality of the actual bioregulators once you start diluting the original supply chain.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess now that we went over, bioregulator and what a peptide is,
sure.
I think we should probably start, in alphabetical order so people can kind of understand. We'll go through both.
Yeah.
Peptides and bioregulators. So
Let's do it.
5-amino MQ. I know it's available, in capsules, and it's also available, I guess, for research and injection. But tell me a little bit about what that one does and maybe some benefits or.
Yeah, for sure. So 5-amino 1-MQ is actually technically a small molecule, but it's sold as a peptide and licensed as a peptide. And obviously compounders and research chemical companies all sell it equally. And you're right, most people that have familiarity with that have used that as a capsule, but it is injectable. But 5-amino 1-MQ is a mitochondrial optimizing small molecule / peptide. And it's really, really good for increasing energy, enhancing endurance. Again, all of the mitochondrial peptides / bioregulators enhance energy production, right? Because it's stimulating the mitochondria, which are the powerhouses of the cells, which most people that have a 101 level of biology, learned at some point in their academic careers. But they're very strong in just, again, from my use, and I've used them, pretty prolifically from say 2017 to 2019. You notice just better gym performance, better energy, and definitely you have more endurance. So if you're like a basketball player, a football player, a track and field athlete or something like that, you'll be able to like run faster and jump higher. The problem with that product or that peptide is that your body, it develops receptor attenuation or sensitivity to it really fast. So you can't take it very long. Like a newbie to 5-amino 1-MQ could probably take it for 8 to 10 weeks and still get benefit. But somebody like me and you, who's already pretty much mitochondrial optimized, hormonally optimized, whatever, we're probably only going to notice really good effects for 4 to 6 weeks.
Okay. And then would the best solution for someone to do it, if they did feel the effects, would they take a 4 to 6 week break, or would they take more of like a 6-month break? I mean, what would be the best way to take it if they did see benefit from it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. It really just depends on exactly what your goal is, right? Like, so if your goal is just, you want to feel better in the gym, have a little bit more strength and endurance and power, you can definitely just cycle it. And we should talk about cycling peptides. The most important thing about peptides to understand when you're using like growth hormone agonist peptides versus growth hormone, which we can also talk about at some point in this podcast, is that your body does develop what are called antibody resistance to the peptides. And when you have antibody resistance, all it means is the body has grown from a cell signaling pathway resistant to the effects of it. So how you mitigate that or mediate that is you just go off, right? And so normally I usually recommend if you're on for 4 to 6 weeks, you should be off for 3 to 4 weeks. If you're on for 8 to 12 weeks, you should be off for 4 to 6 weeks. So you don't have to be on or you don't have to be off as long as you are on, but you have to definitely get back off so that your body can basically get rid of the resistance that it had built up.
I've heard some people say so many different things. I do know about your body adapts to the peptide and it's no longer as effective. What about the protocol that's 5 days on, 2 days off, and you stay on for a longer period of time? Is that effective?
So it can be. So it's another great question, and we should dive deep and explain that. So basically, what happens when you're using a growth hormone agonist, and it's mostly growth hormone agonist versus like a mitochondrial peptide like that one, but they all develop receptor attenuation. We all develop resistance to them at some point through antibody buildup. It depends on what your body's natural IGF-1 production is, right? So as we get older, and let's just say like we'll just use 40 years old as the baseline. If you were to measure a man or woman's IGF-1 levels, and again, IGF is interstitial growth fluid. It's basically a measurement of growth hormone antibodies and a bunch of other stuff that's flowing through the body that allows you to have IGF-1 levels. But at 40, it starts to decline. And we're all different. As you and I were talking about last night, we're all biochemically unique. We're all N of 1. So you can measure a person's IGF-1 levels at various points of the day and see different readings. So it's like really difficult. When people ask me, what should be my IGF-1 level to determine whether I should use a growth hormone peptide or growth hormone agonist peptide or even growth hormone itself, I always tell them, don't go by your IGF-1 levels because it's inter-individual based on time of day that you take it. But you can just pretty much understand that once you're at 40, and obviously as you get older, your IGF-1 levels are on a pretty steep decline.
Sure.
So a 50-year-old man or woman has almost none, and I don't care what kind of shape you're in or physical health you're in, you just aren't producing as much. So understanding that, peptides and bioregulators for the most part are only enhancing what your body is naturally producing. So if we know that at 50, at 55, at 60, our IGF-1 is naturally declining, we're not going to get as much production / effect from a peptide that's stimulating it because it doesn't have anything to stimulate. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that's one of the big misses, I think, in the clinical space is that a lot of doctors don't understand that well enough. And so they're prescribing peptides sometimes to people in their late 50s and 60s and even in their 70s. And they should be prescribing growth hormone because the effects are not going to be as significant because they don't have the natural IGF-1 levels.
So back to the 5 days on, 2 days off. What about, so I get it on the growth hormone.
Sure.
What about just the mitochondrial ones, or what about some other peptides? Is that still a decent protocol?
It is, but I would also say, again, it really depends on, again, how much natural IGF you have producing. So in a mitochondrial peptide, it's probably won't be as much benefit by just doing 5 days on and 2 days off versus doing an IGF stimulating peptide, because then you're in your mind, you're saying, okay, I'm giving my pituitary some time to actually reconstitute and build back up. But again, depending on the age, it's not going to really matter much if you're 50 to 55 or even 60 and you have very little anyway. So whenever people ask me, like, they start human growth hormone or they start tesamorelin or they start ipamorelin or CJC or one of those growth hormone agonist peptides, they'll say to me that. They'll be like, should I go off, 2 days on the weekend or take 1 day off on the weekend? I'll say you can, but if you're going to actually observe your IGF-1 levels and if it's going to make a big difference by taking time off, it probably won't because you don't have that much anyway. Now, if you're 30 or 35 or 40, that's a great and very, very smart choice, because you are giving your body some time off to allow your pituitary to reset. And so you have some endogenous growth hormone after taking the peptide.
So it sounds like no matter what, any peptide you're taking, the better protocol would be to take a break from it. If it's, you take it for 4 to 6 weeks, then you're going to at least take 4 weeks off or so.
That's what I recommend. And again, as you become more seasoned, more experienced with using peptides, your body will know, you'll know intuitively, if it's not working anymore. And another thing too that's important, and this is how you can actually test it, is when you have antibody buildup, your body starts retaining water a lot more. So intercellular water. So let's say you're using a person, and I don't want to skip ahead because we're going to go through all of these, but let's say you're using a GH agonist peptide like Tesa, Ipa, or CJC. And by the way, women notice this even as much as men. Once it stops working as well, you'll start having more water buildup in the cells. And you'll notice that in the lower, abdominal region or a place like that. So when you start holding water, that's time to go off.
Interesting. I've never heard that before. Okay. Good advice. So second peptide, I think, and probably one of the most popular, is BPC-157. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And I'm sure everybody knows it kind of is the healing peptide. It's definitely one of the ones that helped Gentry the most. She thought her shoulder was messed up forever, and she had some, she did an MRI and had a L1 something or another in her back. I don't know what it was. And she swears by it. I think after 60, 65 days, she was like, I swear, she was sleeping with a heating pad every night.
Yeah.
Stop using that altogether. Her shoulder doesn't hurt anymore. She goes to Pilates. She does everything just like it never happened. And so she's definitely a big believer. And then she was also one of the ones that said, how long do I stay on, go off, and stay back on, because it helped her so much.
So BPC 157 is definitely the world's most known peptide. It stands for body protective compound. And BPC 157 is actually a very profound angiogenic peptide. And what that means is it increases red blood cell formation and tissue or flow of blood cells to the area that is injured. So if you get like a tendon rupture, a ligament tear, a sprain, a strain, an ankle, knee, anything like that that's soft tissue related, BPC is like a wonder drug or a wonder peptide for rehabilitation and improving vascular tissue strengthening. It also has the ability, and we should mention that TB500, which is thymosin beta 500, which is the synergistic peptide with it, because it profoundly suppresses inflammation. So anytime you get injured, again, sprain, strain, tear, anything related to soft tissue, you want to use BPC 157 and TB500 together in synergy, especially when it's a very acute injury like a rupture or a tendon tear, because the TB500 is going to suppress the inflammation and the BPC is going to increase the regeneration from the red blood cell formation.
Yeah, I want to clarify. That's
Yes.
actually what we took. She took a combination of TB500 and BPC in the same bottle. And I was taking the same thing. We were both doing it every night. I didn't really specifically have an injury. I was more doing it to try out, more for performance and, maybe see if I got any mental energy or mental clarity out of it. And, I definitely felt like I would recover a little bit faster. Other than that, personally, since I didn't have an injury, I didn't notice like a ton like she did from it.
Yeah, and it's mostly for people that are injured, but there is a lot of science that's pretty much hidden that shows that it does a lot of crazy things that we wouldn't even otherwise know. Like BPC also enhances androgen receptor sensitivity. So for people that are on therapeutic testosterone or therapeutic hormones, a very, very microdose of BPC will enhance the effects. So it makes your tissue more sensitive to it. So, I mean, it's really, really interesting because a lot of the peptides, which we'll cover today, there's uses or use cases for them that we don't even still understand, that when people take, they're getting benefit without knowing. So to what you were just saying, a microdose of BPC probably once or twice a week for somebody who's a hard conditioned athlete, trainee, 3 or 4 days a week of lifting and trains, at say positive muscle failure rates, it's a really great adjunct to take it. But for the people that are listening to this podcast, if you're injured, you have soft tissue injuries, there's nothing stronger than TB500 and BPC 157 to regenerate tissue and cells. It also, again, due to the angiogenic nature, it can also help with hair regrowth. So there's a lot of things it does. It also helps with nerve fiber regeneration or bundleization. So when you get a serious injury, nerve fiber bundles are damaged or frayed or kind of just like blocked off. So it helps to establish the sensitivity in the nerve fiber bundles. The other thing I would just say about BPC and TB500, which is pretty amazing, is that it doesn't take a lot to help with a very mild sprain or strain that, let's say, you suffer from injury. So like, for example, like for somebody like me, in your 50s, I train pretty hard, but I can easily strain an elbow joint, or I can strain something for something stupid. You could literally inject BPC, a microdose of BPC the same day, and it's like you never hurt.
Let's talk about that. So if somebody had an injury, what dosing would be ideal for them to start out with?
So it's a great question. So but basically, it depends on how acute the injury is. So if you have a severe tendon and tear and a rupture, you're going to want to use BPC and TB500, say concomitantly, as a clinician would say, 2 to 3 times a day for 2 weeks. And the dosage is going to be based on, how much you have, whether or not you have it combined. I love when it's combined in the same vial, so that, you don't have to calculate, what the BPC is versus the TB500, but it's usually anywhere from like 300 to 500 micrograms of each. Okay. And again, injected 2 to 3 times a day until you have noticeable inflammation reduction. So if again, let's say you tear an ACL or you tear an elbow, or, a lot of bodybuilders and guys that are like us who lift, they'll tear the distal bicep tendon, right? They literally tear it as you get older. It just tears off. And you can inject it literally locally, BPC and TB500, right into the area. And I'm not kidding you. Outside of surgery, it can reattach the actual biceps tendon back to the muscle joint. That's how profound it is. I've seen guys do that. But 2 weeks of like 2 to 3 times a day until you get rid of all the inflammation. And then again, depending on how fast you heal, how old you are, what the level or severity of the nature of the injury is, probably another 2 to 3 weeks. And then you can be back to where you can just start doing rehabilitation.
So actually, I take that back. That is the only nagging injury I kind of have. I don't know if it was from my CrossFit days or what, but just right here on both sides, it takes me a long time to warm up. Like I can't just go and do straight into biceps and like start doing even decent heavy weight. That's the only pain I have. And I didn't notice too much of the BPC, but again, I was just injecting it, subcutaneously in my stomach. I wasn't really trying to.
Yeah. So if you have, so I know exactly what you have because I have the same thing. So it's basically like the insertion point where your biceps tendon and your femoral tendon connects right here, or your pronator teres. And we get like, it's overuse. It's repetitive use from curling.
And if I do a hammer this way, nothing. It's
exactly
whenever
when you go like this. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Because it activates. I feel it right now. You activate it. So yeah. So if you, and I tell people this all the time, and I'm not going to take my shirt off or my jacket off to show this, but you just pinch the skin. So it's like if you guys are seeing this on podcast, if you're pinching the skin above the area, you can inject it into the skin above that and you won't feel any pain.
Okay, that's what I was wondering too, because people are like, just put it in localized areas.
No, if you inject into your bicep tendon, you'll be like, whoa.
Yeah. Then I might be pronouncing some of these wrong too.
No, it's all good.
Cagrilintide?
Yeah, Cagrilintide.
Cagrilintide,
yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so that's awesome that you brought that one up. So I have personally not used this peptide. And it is a GLP. It's considered a GLP-1 classification. So what it does is it's probably of all of the GLPs, and it's a newer one. It's only been in the marketplace for like 15 to 18 months. It dramatically crushes appetite. So it's like semaglutide, as people would known as Wegovy from the pharmaceutical side of things, but it's even stronger. And so like you can take, for people like us, so let me back up. I would not recommend this drug to anyone other than morbidly obese and metabolically dysregulated people because it's so powerful of an appetite suppressor. However, there are guys now in the biohacking space or the longevity space who are saying that you can use a microdose of it with retatrutide because retatrutide doesn't have, as I was telling you last night, the appetite suppressing effect. So if you're, let's say you're one of those people that fasts 72 hours once a month because you just do it for the autophagy and the hormesis and the anti-aging effects, then that would be an awesome drug to take along with retatrutide for obviously all the metabolism boosting effects. And we'll get into retatrutide, but that drug is really strong in suppressing appetite. So again, if you're like me or you or our wives or anything like that, and you take a normal recommended pharmaceutical dose, you won't eat for 3 days, bro.
Gentry started on, when she first started taking the GLP-1, she started on semaglutide.
Yeah.
But it was just making her so sick. I mean, even at a really low dose, she switched to trizepatide eventually, and then pretty much no side effects. I mean, a little bit of the nausea like for like a day.
Yeah.
Again, she takes like a really micro dose.
Sure.
That's probably just for someone that is extremely overweight, really needs to lose a ton of weight.
So when you take it, it's another one of those things where you really have to be, because you and I were talking about last night, you have to be very, very critically and analyzing yourself and making sure you're getting protein because you could literally go 3 days without eating.
Yeah.
So it's not
for somebody that's working out every day.
Yeah, and we should say this, again, we talked about this last night, but just to say this for the podcast, the majority of GLP-1 peptides that are prescribed by doctors are overprescribed. And what I mean by that is, I have a methodology in my world where it's like start low, go slow. Theirs is start high, go higher. Because again, it's A, how they make money. And B, it's how they get people who are otherwise not exercising, not changing their diet, not living insulin controlled, not basically doing the things that you and I know you should do when you're taking a GLP-1. And so they just give them a higher dosage because the higher dosage just makes them eat less.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that people need to realize, whether they get it from a doctor or, somewhere online, is you have to have the right macros and nutrition and use it as a tool to change your daily habits. Then you're going to see a huge impact in your life.
100%. I have a protocol. It's basically, if you're going to use a GLP-1, in fact, Dr. Eberwein, Dr. Rudolph Eberwein, who's at MHI in Miami, he's like the world's #1 prescribing GLP doctor. He has a big 90-minute interview with me in my GLP-1 course. And he talks about, he says, when I lecture at medical conferences to talk about GLP-1s, I tell doctors that if they do not tell their patients when they're prescribing GLPs that they have to eat, 1 gram of protein per pound of targeted body weight and lift weights, they're guilty of malpractice. And he says, I also tell them that if their patients, if you don't get them to sign a piece of paper saying they're going to do those things, they're also guilty of malpractice because, let's be honest, they're going to have muscle loss. They're going to have metabolism dysregulation. They're going to have all the negative side effects that you see in the mainstream. And so it's like, who's responsible for that? You're the prescribing clinician. You're the patient's advocate. If you're not teaching your patients to do this, this is what's going to end up happening. So I love the fact that he says that. But the real truth of it is that the protocol should be very simple. It should be living insulin controlled, which means obviously you know what it means and your audience mostly knows what it means. But for people that don't, it's regulating your carbohydrate consumption.
Yes.
Okay, that's critically important. Number 2 is eating enough protein, which in women is even more important because most women are protein malnourished. They just don't eat enough protein. They A, think they're going to get big and bulky, or B, they think they're going to gain fat or gain weight from eating too much protein.
My wife was guilty of that too.
Yes, but it's most women. I would say it's 90% of women, especially fit conscious women, who think that if they eat 120 to 125 or 150 grams of protein, they're going to get fat, or they're going to put on too much muscle or whatever nonsense. There's so much misinformation. But so it's protein, living insulin controlled, and then again, must do bone bearing or resistance training exercise. And I would say to add in cardiovascular exercise, because if you don't do those things, these drugs are so profound, as you know, Sean, that they will cause muscle loss. They will cause muscle protein catabolism. And so those 3 things are critically important. And I would say, not to leave it off, and it might even be number 1, is like, make sure you're not suffering from a hormone deficiency. Because if you are suffering from a hormone deficiency and you start off on, again, a higher dose of a GLP-1, you're going to have muscle loss. There's absolutely no doubt about it, because there's nothing to prevent you from actually protecting your muscle tissue.
Yeah, and especially if they go into a malnutrition state,
100%.
By doing so, it's just going to make your hormone stuff worse.
It's a real double-edged sword, or what I call a conundrum, because again, as we were talking about last night, if you see a really big person and they want to lose weight and they have all these metabolic, just call it metabolic derangements, they have, their gut's infected, their body's constantly screaming, eat, feed me, feed me, feed me. And then they go on a GLP and the GLP makes them stop eating and they see the weight pile off. And so they're like, yes, this is working. But they don't understand that by not eating at all, they're also damaging the metabolism. They're destroying thyroid. They're slowing down basic metabolic rate. So there's all these negative, consequences that are coming that'll be a cascade for later. But in the first week or 10 days or even 2 weeks, they see the weight falling off. And so they think it's working.
So definitely for everybody out there that's listening, if you don't have a doctor that told you those exact things and harps on nutrition and really educates you on the cons and what you need to be doing, then you probably need to find a new doctor.
That's what I say. Fire your doctor immediately.
Yeah. If they're not doing that, or if you're just going through some random telehealth person,
Totally.
you need to get a real doctor, because they're going to change your life. What a real doctor is going to do that is well-versed in all this stuff is going to actually educate you, and then it's going to help you change your whole life. So when you do take the peptide or whatever else, or a GLP-1 or anything, you're going to improve every area of your life and not just, use it for a quick fix.
Exactly. 100%.
Let's go into, this is a bioregulator. So Cardiogen?
Yeah, Cardiogen.
Cardiogen, okay.
Yeah. So amazing bioregulator. So there's a bunch of bioregulators that serve the vascular pathways, and Cardiogen is basically one that will improve vascular function. So as we get older, our blood flow becomes not as efficient, due to all the, just call them the free oxy radicals and the oxidative waste and everything else that's going on from just living, right? Just eating, surviving. I mean, dude, living in Houston, living in Tampa, living in LA, living in New York, there are so many contaminants in the environment that we just have to break down and go through just living. And Cardiogen is a very profound peptide that improves blood flow. It just, imagine something that will maximize and optimize all your vascular pathways. So it's a really, really good bioregulator for people like us. to take, again, if you want to take a minor dose, a maintenance dose, or if you want to just say, hey, I'm going to do this for like 30 days once a year, I'm going to get my blood work done. I'm going to look at all my biomarkers. I'm going to look at all my vascular biomarkers. I'm going to understand my, my ApoE and my ApoB. And again, all my my blood lipids and all that stuff like that. It's a really good drug once you understand your biomarkers, or I shouldn't say drug, it's a bioregulator. I say that all the time. But it's a really good bioregulator to take to optimize or to, help with inefficiency. So people that have like low LDL level, low HDL levels, which is high density lipoprotein, taking that will improve or should technically improve your HDL levels. I mean, there's a lot of things you can do for HDL, which we don't have to get into, supplementation and dietary wise, like taking olive oil, drinking, I know people that do shots of olive oil, or you can even take olive oil capsules, but at the end of the day, that's a really strong bioregulator to help with vascular function.
Okay. What about Cartalax? It's same as a bioregulator.
Yeah, so it's same class. Another one that is going to help actually with cartilage regeneration. I mean, there's all of the bioregulators that help with blood flow and vascular improvement or vascular optimization. Again, if you think about what does blood flow do, what does angiogenesis do? Angiogenesis is improving red blood cell formation and function and flow. And so any of that stuff is going to help with bone regeneration. It's going to help with cartilage regeneration. It's going to help with nerve fiber bundle regeneration and synthesis. So all of these things will play a role in that.
Okay. So here's one that I have, heard a decent amount about and heard on a couple of podcasts is Cerebrolysin.
So Cerebrolysin, that's a whole podcast. Yeah. So like Cerebrolysin,
high level to just kind of tell people.
Cerebrolysin is by far the most profound nootropic peptides, right? So it is a very powerful brain modulating peptide in that it literally goes to work in helping to regenerate synaptic pathways in the brain. Actually, it goes to regenerate synaptic, dendritic, and serotonergic pathways. So those are your three main, focus pathways of the brain. And basically what happens in people that have neurodegenerative disease, which would be Alzheimer's, Lou Gehrig's, dementia, is those pathways start breaking down. And to understand that, because I think people deserve to understand this, is like basically whenever someone has a neurodegenerative disease, it's classified now, and to the smart people in the clinical space, as type 3 diabetes. So type 2 diabetes, obviously we know, is due to the pancreas, the chemoreceptors in your pancreas failing, because over time in your life, and by the way, this is like 65% of American adults over 40 have type 2 diabetes or are close to being type 2 diabetic. And this is because they've never lived insulin control. They've always eaten refined carbohydrates, drank too much alcohol,
sodas,
right? Drank too much carbonic or, phosphoric acid in sodas and stuff like that. And so eventually, the best way to understand this for people that are lay is like you have a certain amount of chemoreceptors in your pancreas, and think of them as like a hinge on a screen-in door on the main door. Eventually, when you don't live insulin controlled, the hinges break. And so every time you eat a carbohydrate source, when the hinges are working, the hinges are keeping your insulin down and suppressed, and you're insulin sensitive. But over time, once they break, your insulin just goes boop, 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 boop. So you're spiking, and now your blood sugar is out of control, and having unstable blood sugar is the fastest pathway to death. I mean, it causes pretty much every form of disease, heart attack, diabetes, obviously, ocular issues, joint issues. The list is endless. But when you're taking Cerebrolysin, if a person that has like early stage dementia or Alzheimer's takes high dosages of Cerebrolysin, they can cure it. I'm not kidding you. There's actually been cases of physicians who have talked about taking high doses, prescribing high dosages for their early onset dementia and neurodegenerative disease patients who have completely reversed it. Now, the weird thing is, and like I'm very reluctant when I talk about this stuff, hopefully you guys don't have to cut any of this, is that
it's hard to say.
The AMA does not want doctors prescribing Cerebrolysin. They do not want their their dementia or Alzheimer's patients taking it, because obviously it's a threat against the major drug pathways that they're trying to develop right now for Alzheimer's, because they see in the next 5 to 7 years, Alzheimer's is going to probably become the number one killer of older people.
The pharmaceutical companies get to treat somebody for the rest of their life.
Exactly. And the drugs are an absolute fortune, versus Cerebrolysin, which is right now pretty much in America, if you get it, is a relatively expensive peptide, although it's not like super expensive, especially in comparison to the allopathic big pharma drugs. But high dosages of Cerebrolysin do all sorts of amazing things. to the brain. And as I was telling you, I was just at a seminar in Las Vegas with a guy who's a well-known subject matter expert from the Balkans, and he talked about in the paramedic units and the emergency responding vehicles, they have high dose cerebrolysin that they give people who have heart attacks or have vascular incidents or strokes or a thrombotic event or whatever. And I was like blown away. He was like, yeah, dude, we get them in the bus and we inject them with a high dose of cerebrolysin because we know it can literally bring them back from like a vascular occlusion. So you think about that, and that's in the Balkans. And the fact that we're not doing that in the United States is just laughable, right? And then again, as I just told you, I mean, like, it's a well-known thing in the prescribing community and the functional wellness and the functional docs who do prescribe peptides to not let, big pharma / the AMA know that you're prescribing cerebrolysin, because it's like off. I mean, that's a dirty peptide.
Of course.
You know what I mean? And
slippery slope with doctors.
Well, this is what they say, and we should say this for the podcast. It's derived from pigs. It's porcine.
Okay.
Now, if you understand, and I don't want to rabbit hole on this, but if you understand a pig's anatomy and physiology, it's very close to humans. It's really weird. That's a whole another rabbit hole and tinfoil hat and woo-woo concept to even go down that path. But pigs are very, very similar to human anatomy and physiology. And that's why we take desiccated thyroid, which also comes from pig.
And that's what I've heard too.
Yes.
I knew that one of the thyroid versions had come from pig.
So basically, you got all these people that are saying we can't give a brain and improving or brain regenerating peptide that comes from a pig to a human, whereas the people that are familiar with cerebrolysin and have been using it either clinically or like off label for a long time are like, oh no, it's not a risk, because they understand that the anatomy and physiology is so similar.
So does it actually repair the pathways for neurotransmitters, or does it boost your levels of serotonin and dopamine? Okay.
Both. It can do both. But I mean, in people that are functionally in a bad place, again, early onset dementia or Alzheimer's, it's regenerating. So
what about
a lot of them?
Yeah. What about people, first thought that comes to me is like depression, anxiety, and some people maybe not having the right pathways of where that's why they get prescribed SSRI or some other version where it's going to allow them to, I guess, reuptake more serotonin or more dopamine. Would this be beneficial, and should maybe somebody avoid it if they're already on SSRI or?
So that's a good question. There's definitely potential competing issues neurologically if a person is on SSRI. I mean, I don't want to rabbit hole, but SSRIs are such bad drugs. They do so many bad things. They create so many downstream issues. There are a lot of competing issues. Like, for example, you and I were talking about tesofensine. Like somebody who's on an SSRI, who's been on an SSRI for a long time and then goes on tesofensine, like that's a problem. But most of the nootropic peptides, I haven't at least seen any kind of high risk issues where if a person is taking an SSRI, I mean, most of the people that are taking, say a Cerebrolysin or a Celank or a C-Max or any of those are usually not on SSRIs at this point. And so they're using this to recover or whatever. But to answer your question, I don't want to say never, but there's always a possibility of cross-linking and issues. But for most people that are going to use, let's say, high-dose Cerebrolysin, it's going to be in people that already have early onset neurodegenerative disease. And so you're going to be using it to regenerate. But for people like us who want to just get a brain boost or maybe some, cognitive enhancement, I think that you probably can use it, even if you are on an SSRI. You just have to be very cautious on how much you're using.
Yeah, I was thinking that too. If somebody was worried about it, they could just start super low and almost microdose it and then just barely work your way up.
And I don't know too many people, because I in my book and in my articles and whenever I'm on podcasts, I talk about because it's so profound, I like for people to save Cerebrolysin as a last ditch, right? So it's your mom has early onset Alzheimer's or dementia or Lou Gehrig's or something like that, or even something neurological, I would start dosing them with high dose Cerebrolysin because of all the effects that it does. But to talk about the other ones like Celank, C-Max, there's other ones. What is the one that people are telling me about? PNE. I mean, there's a bunch of newer ones now that people are using for nootropic or for it to enhance, to alleviate
cognitive
depression.
function or memory,
to alleviate depression, enhance short-term and long-term memory, and slightly modify cognitive production or cognitive function. Those are the ones we would talk about that you would probably use, and so you would probably want to save Cerebrolysin for when you need your biggest tool in the tool belt.
It was interesting because 6-7 years ago what got me into functional medicine is I got to a point where I was having I had headache like a tension headache, not like a migraine, for like
Yeah.
3 months straight. And and then I started getting them every other day. It was almost like this like rhythm of no matter what I did, that I would get them. And so that was like kind of interesting. It's like, for the most part, they're when I do get them, they're really, minimal now, because I've, optimize everything else, optimize hormones, like optimize my lifestyle and sleep. It's interesting. Like that one, I don't know if I could get rid of them completely 100%. It might be worth maybe trying microdose or something and maybe seeing if it affected it any at all.
Whenever I hear from somebody that has headaches or has,
It's like a tension headache. Like,
Yeah,
I guess,
so-
and I had
so-
anxiety since I was 15, just came from nothing. It just,
Sure.
I had it my whole life. And whenever we fixed, some of the methylation stuff, the hormones, like really minimalized most of it.
almost all headaches are vascular related. So what I mean by that is that you have some sort of occlusion in your capillary networks or something like that because, and again, you're right. I mean, the majority of people that have like migraines or serious headaches all the time, they just have like really poor blood pressure.
Yeah.
And it's again, due to lifestyle, too much inflammation, too much sugar. I mean, sugar causes headaches all the time. Like if you're eating like a really refined carbohydrate diet and you don't get enough protein and you're not exercising, all those people have headaches all the time because they just don't have, their blood pressure's unstable. But when you clean up your life and start living insulin controlled and obviously get enough protein and exercise and sleep and all the things that we talk about when we're biohacking ourselves, you won't suffer from headaches as much because it's, like a tension headache is like something that could just be stress related. You could literally be thinking about something.
The problem is it was happening to me. Even if I just sat at my house, did nothing, it almost, once that happened that first time for 3 or 4 months straight, and I just ran myself into the ground, it just became like almost would happen every other day, no matter how my lifestyle was.
And how long did it last?
For the rest of the day until I went to sleep, every single time. And so it would start around lunchtime, and then it would get worse throughout the day. And then it wouldn't go away until I went to sleep that night. And then I woke up the next day, felt, a little foggy, but then I'd start working out. Then I'd feel normal the next day.
Yeah.
And so it was super weird. But optimizing all the stuff I did, again, got rid of like 90% of it.
Yeah.
I still, have issues from time to time. Again, way more manageable.
Yeah,
I mean, it's just light.
I would
but
say you could definitely experiment with like, I would experiment
Or
with
another one,
Dihexa, Slank.
somebody else told me about Dihexa, so we'll go through that one too. But okay, next one, CJC 1295, which I know is pretty popular. This, I wrote it down by itself, but I know when people have told me about it, is always blended with some type of
usually
Ipamorelin
or 5-AOD 964 or whatever. So here's my thing on like, and I'm very outspoken about CJC. CJC in the clinical studies, and there are many, shows a very pronounced IGF-1 stimulation. Now, if you've ever injected CJC 1295 in isolation, and by the way, they have like, it's called with DAC or without DAC, and without getting down the rabbit hole about them, one just extends the efficacy and the other one without it doesn't, right? But they both produce a very similar growth hormone response initially. With DAC, it just extends the life of that response. So, some people will say it's better because you get more growth hormone stimulus over the course of the day. But the bottom line with that peptide is very, very strong. And I don't like it because most people who inject it get a flushing or a redness at the site, or even sometimes they get a hot flash. A lot of women who are perimenopausal and, in their late 40s and early 50s, when they inject that, they're like, oh my God, it makes my body on fire. And so it's very uncomfortable. But it is very profound it's actually a growth hormone releasing agonist. And so a lot of people will stack it or even combine it in vials with Ipamorelin, or I've even seen it, like I said, we were just talking, I've seen it combined with 5-AOD. And again, the reason they're doing that is they're giving you a growth hormone releasing agonist with a growth hormone releasing peptide. And so you're supposed to be getting like a double-edged synergistic effect. But again, because it's so strong, when it's dosed with Ipamorelin in like the combined vial, I see a lot of people feel uncomfortable injecting it. And then I also see itchiness and redness, site irritability from the injection place. And so I'm not a big advocate of it. So I usually tell people that Ipamorelin in isolation is less side effect. There's less of a side effect. There's no flushing. You don't have that effect. And then I also see, and again, for women specifically, because I know you guys have a lot of women in your listening audience, I like Ipamorelin over CJC for that reason. Its effects in improving, life extension factors like better skin quality, better skin elasticity, deeper sleep, fat loss is just as good as CJC, but with less side effects.
Okay. One that somebody recommended to me too that I don't know much about is Epithalon.
So Epithalon is a life extension peptide technically, and you take that. So basically, there's two of them that are well known: Epithalon and thymolin, and they're actually bioregulators, but they're sold as peptides. They actually have oral capsules of both Epithalon and thymolin, but you can inject them too. So if you're going to use the injectable versions of them, what they do is they improve telomerase expression. And telomerase is obviously the DNA shortening growth factor as we get older, right? So basically, if you want to live longer, stronger, and resist the just called the aging mechanisms of like senescent cells and free oxyradicals and oxidative waste, if your telomerase is working better at the DNA level, you'll resist aging. Again, theoretically, and then also in the studies. And so by taking Epithalon or thymolin together, and most people recommend that you do them together, you take a 10-day course of both. And you do it like, depending on your age, you do it like twice a year. So for me now at 50, and again, this is in my book and in my articles, but I recommend 2 courses a year.
And I think where most people would probably recognize some of this information is, I guess they've heard about people now measuring their biological age.
Exactly.
And so that is in relation to the telomere length or something like that, right?
Yeah. So the guys that run True Diagnostic are my good friends, right? That's Ryan Smith and the guys from TaylorMade, or the former TaylorMade guys, the Compound Pharmacy. And those are guys, Ryan's a very close personal friend of mine, but he's the CEO of that company. He will tell you they're getting better now by the day. I would actually say even by the month, their data is getting more and more robust. But you got to be careful with biological age because it measures a lot of, I would call it conflicting and conflating effects on people's cells. And they're obviously running all this like giant AI algorithmic data that they're mixing and matching and stuff like that. Because I've seen people that have had those tests done. There's not just True Diagnostic. There's like 3 other companies now, but True Diagnostic is the biggest name one. But I've seen conflicting values where a guy will go and do like, what's the other? The other is glycan age. They'll do a glycan age test and they'll be 24, and on True Diagnostic they'll be 46, or vice versa. So you have to be really very careful and cautious on not getting too focused and reliant on the data. But they're improving so much that I would say like within the next 5 to 10 years that biological age testing will be pretty foolproof, but they're not there yet. And again, I've had people who are very well-to-do people that are in my audience that freak out, right? Because they get this like insane, they do everything right. They're low body fat. There's no inflammation. They're in great shape. They look young for their age. And then they do it and they get one back. It says they're 70 or something like that. And they're 54. And so they freak out and then they go back and then, they find out it was a bad batch or, there's all this crazy stuff. So let's just put it this way. We're in the wild, wild west with biological age testing. So I would say for anybody who's doing that, don't become so reliant on that data to think that that's the be all end all.
And it should just get better over time as we get more data, really,
Exactly.
since it's so early on.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I was thinking about doing it. I haven't done one yet. And again, somebody was telling me about this particular peptide, and I was thinking about doing the biological test before and then maybe running this and then later, or just have something to measure it by. I wish I would have done it before I started down the functional medicine path.
Yeah.
But it kind of sounds like, maybe it's not going to be that accurate as of yet, but
here's my criterion. If you're like you and me and you're in your 40s or 50s and you have low inflammation, well, let's just take another step back. All the statistics say the leaner you are, the longer you'll live. That is the number one criteria for living long and strong, is being lean. If you are, and again, people always ask me, well, Jay, what are the numbers? If you are a man and you're between 12 and 15% year round, you will statistically live longer than anyone else. If you're a woman and you're 16 to 22% year round, you will statistically live longer than everyone else. And again, you and I were talking about this last night. Why do people die from inflammation? Inflammation is caused by visceral body fat. The more visceral body fat that we hold on our body surrounding our internal organs, the faster we're going to die, because we're going to get some form of a disease. And again, it's dis-ease, right? So all diseases are some form of aging. Again, whether they're heart, whether they're brain, whether they're organ, whether they're biological system, they're all from inflammatory cascades and pathways due to visceral body fat. So if you are lean, like you and I are, and If you're under 10% year round, which I would say probably you and I are probably pretty close to that, then you're statistically going to live longer than anyone else. It doesn't matter what you do, what peptides you take, if you're hormonally optimized, if you're exercising, you're doing all that. Because again, what will kill you other than an accident, right? Like you're in a bus accident or a plane crashes or something like that, because you don't have anything causing disease. It's impossible. I mean, that's what people don't understand. Cancer is caused by visceral body fat and inflammation. There's always an initial onset of something. That's not to say that people don't just get cancer who are in great health and stuff like that, and I know those things are happening, but those are people that mostly are outliers. Almost all disease is caused by inflammation. It's that simple.
Also quality of life. I mean,
Oh, yeah,
inflammation causes so many other issues.
Of course.
So people have to realize that too. If you lower inflammation, not only are you going to live longer, you're going to have such a better quality of life, more energy. Your joints aren't going to feel as bad. Your mental clarity is going to be way higher.
Dude, people don't realize that when you're morbidly obese, you are suffering from cytokine storms 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They are in intense suffering. And that's why I'm like, so my mom died 2 years ago from COVID, but she was actually morbidly obese. And so it's like, I'm like a champion for helping people that are fat who want to turn their life around. But most people don't understand that when you see a morbidly obese person in society, they're in abject suffering pain at all time. Their body has a cytokine storm that is erupting in all levels of their body at all times. So, it's imperative for people like us, for people that have, voices and platforms and, audiences to really help and encourage people who are obese or are massively, call them metabolic emergencies, as one of my clinician friends say, that they can turn it around. And as you and I know, with GLPs and obviously, advice and advocacy and stuff like that. But man, it's really brutal to realize like how much a person who is morbidly obese is suffering in life.
I always feel really bad for them because I'm like, when I look at somebody like that, I go, they have no idea how good they could really feel.
Exactly.
And maybe I'm like,
their default state.
And yeah, that's what I'm saying. So maybe in my head, I go, well, maybe they just don't even know because they've never even been there. They've been out of shape for so long. They don't realize like how much it would change their life. And so they don't care to maybe.
I had deep conversations.
I don't understand the mentality just because, I know how good that I can feel when I'm in shape. Yeah. And it's like, why wouldn't you want to just give a little bit of effort and try to do that? If
you nailed it. They don't know. Like I had very deep, intimate conversations with my mom before she died at the end. And I mean, there was a time in my life, because she was morbidly obese for the last 30 years of my life. And when I was younger and stuff like that, I said, look, I won't work. I'll take a year off and I'll get you in shape. I love my mom. I really wanted to help her. But it's like, there's a lot of things mentally. There's a lot of mental illness and obesity too, but it's a very unfortunate thing. And to what you were saying, they don't understand. Like their default state of living is suffering.
If they knew,
it's
almost like
exactly.
If you could plant that, like if you could, like give them a glimpse of that, and they knew, they would change for sure.
They would change, and that's why, thankfully, to transition, GLPs are these. Like I say, they're the most profound and transformative. Medical innovations since penicillin, since antibiotics, right? Because like if you give them and you prescribe them in clinically precise, surgically small dosages, it turns the lights on.
And so for everybody out there, GLP is a peptide, right?
Yes, exactly.
It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, exactly.
The most remarkable drugs in the world recently.
Well, it's funny we should say this. Why the reason they're not banned is because they're making so much money.
I know.
But as you and I also know, they're not prescribed in the mainstream way, in the way that they should be.
Correct.
Because if they were, they wouldn't be making this amount of money, because they wouldn't be prescribing these insane high dosages that are screwing people up.
I don't even know how they could take that, just based on when I watched Gentry do it. I mean, even going up to the normal dose made her so sick. It's crazy to watch. She's like, I can't handle it.
There are people out there taking 25 milligrams of
insane. Yeah, that's insane.
I mean, how metabolically dysregulated would you have to be to even take that?
You know what? They should never even have to get there, because if their doctor had educated them the right way,
exactly.
They wouldn't even need that much anyways.
No, and that's the thing. And this is good to clarify, because a lot of, I think, heavier people, or let's just call them let's call them dumpster fires. They think they need higher dosages.
Because
but the truth is their body is just as sensitive to it as you and I are, but they're given too high to start, and then they're titrated higher every week. And so their body becomes so sensitive to the high dose that they have to take more and more. It's a great scam for Big Pharma, right? That's how they make money.
Yeah.
but it's terrible for that person individually. And we all know that everything that comes from it is negative after, because then they have to come off.
Yep. So optimize the rest of their life. I've actually seen a lot of people that are close to me, friends, people that work with us, other businesses that we do business with, that get on GLPs and actually change their whole life.
It's incredible.
Because I think they start realizing like, oh my God, I feel better. And then they change all their lifestyle.
Totally.
Stop smoking, you start eating right, start exercising every single day, don't want to miss. And then it's almost like it just changed their life. And a lot of them don't even take it anymore.
To what you're saying, we were talking about this last night. There are people that I know that were gambling addicts that stopped gambling. So, I mean, it does
I knew the alcohol thing. It's helped a lot of people, regulate their craving for alcohol.
So like obsessive compulsive disorder, which is gambling, drinking too much alcohol, eating too much sugar, whatever it is, like it changes the brainwave patterning to make them realize, like I said, the lights come on where it's like, I don't have to do this
That
anymore.
craving, yeah. That's what Gentry explained it as. She goes, my wife goes, again, she's always been thin and could eat whatever she wanted, but she
had food noise.
She explained it as like, I don't know what a drug addict feels like. But if I were to imagine it, it's what I feel like when I wake up in the morning and I have this strong craving for a specific type of food. It'll just be random stuff. And she's like, I can't get it out of my head until I eat that specific type of food. And she goes, the minute I started taking it, even at the lowest dose, like I never had that feeling again.
So I'm going to be, as I told you, I'm going to be on the guys at Mind Pump. And I think it would be great to get Sal.
I'd love to talk to
with them. Yeah, but so I'm on there with him tomorrow. But, Sal has a really awesome little individual soliloquy that he went on, I think about 2 years ago, talking about your wife, my mom, all those people that have that addiction in their mind that comes from nowhere. So he calls it the hyper palatability of engineered food. So you have all these, giant, call them big agri companies, and they're engineering the food supply to create a chemical addiction in the brain to a taste or to like your wife. There was just like some specific thing where she would wake up and she would want something. It would be whatever it was. And he's like, look, dude, this is known at the big agri level of these corporations. They're paying these food scientists millions upon hundreds of millions of dollars every year to create these chemical addictions in the brain so that the people continue to eat the food. Because like you said, it's common sense. It's logic. We know that eating it is not good for us, but if our brain is wired to eat it, it's something that it's almost impossible to overcome. And so now we have these amazing tools like GLP-1 peptides that will overcome it. But before it, we didn't have that.
It's also pretty funny where people that do have those cravings, they never crave just like whole foods, right? You never go, man, I just really want all these whole foods and non-processed
It's all
foods.
chemical
Yeah, it's all like just really processed stuff or something that's like truly bad for you.
But it's crazy to think that they actually pay scientists to create these chemical, permutations in the brain to make us think about that food.
Crazy. Hopefully that'll change here in the near future. That'd be really cool to see happen.
Yeah.
Because I think that it's like, that in combination with a lot of the GLP stuff could really help a ton of people in the world. I mean, I think that would be the biggest driver.
Yes.
Changing the food supply. I mean, just starting at the kids level. I mean, it's just so bad.
Yeah, look at cereal. It's incredible.
I've seen all that stuff that's floating around now, and people were like showing you the difference of what you can sell here and what you can sell somewhere else, which is like crazy. I
lived in Mexico for 11 months, and before we moved back to Florida, or moved from California to Mexico and then to Florida. And I've been in Florida now it'll be 2 years in June. But if you go down to a Mexican, high-end grocery store and say like Playa del Carmen or Cancun, and you take the same box of Fruity Pebbles and you take a picture of it and, in Spanish, and you can translate Spanish, and obviously you can use a translator app or whatever, it's different. The chemicals that they put on the food in the United States versus the food they put in Mexico, and it's obviously other Latin American countries and European countries, are night and day. It's insane what they're doing to people.
Basically poisoning everybody. The other funny thing that always comes back to my mind is those memes when you see the people in the 1960s at the beach.
They're all thin.
And like everybody's thin, or just in some, they're
nothing like today.
Yeah. And then you look at the ones today and you're like, holy shit. Like, I can't believe that that's even a thing. And the main thing is nothing really changed. It's not like it's the food. It's
all the food
the
supply.
process and food supply.
Well, it's like you and I were saying last night, like, you know, you and I are in very similar echo chambers where we're around people that are productive, healthy, blah, blah, blah. And then we go into like the mass areas, like the airports.
Yeah, mine's the airport where I walk in, I go, oh, this is really bad.
I mean, like I told you last night, dude, like on the flight, there was a man and a woman, and they were not old. They were probably a little bit older than me, and they could not get out of their seat.
Which is crazy,
it was
right?
6 minutes. I should have timed it, but it was 6 minutes because they were in the aisle in the middle, and then there was a younger woman who was in the window, and she had to go to the bathroom. It took 6 minutes, bro, for them to get up and out for this woman to go to the bathroom. It was insane.
And that's what's weird to me too, is people don't know that they can live a really good life till they're 80 and not. It's like when my
Even
grandparents,
longer,
my
yeah.
grandparents were retired at 65. They sat on the couch every day, and it would just like
Watch
started
TV,
decline
yes.
every day. And I just saw them getting worse and worse, and you know their health continued to deteriorate. My grandma eventually got some Alzheimer's or dementia type disease, but I just watched them, and it's almost like if they only knew, you know, you compare that to my business partner, which is 65.
Sure.
Completely opposite end. Right. I mean, he's like you,
productive,
right? Yeah, and he in his brain's healthy, and he keeps moving, and you can just see the quality of life difference. And it's weird that somebody would accept. It's like, okay, 65, and then I guess this is just how I'm supposed to be.
My dad is the same way. When my mom died 2 years ago now, so it'll be 2 years in March. And my dad is a former Rhodes Scholar, multimillionaire, super successful guy. TV. They just sit there and they watch Fox News, Squawk Box, Jim Cramer. You know, it's like, I always say to my dad, he's a brilliant man. I'm like, Dad, why don't you write a book about your life? Like, you have 9 kids. Like, you have all this. Oh, I wouldn't know how to do that. I'm like, Dad, I literally could give you my team, and you could go into a room and they could just ask you questions and they could record it all. We could make a book on it. It would be in a New York Times bestseller. But he's like, nah, I got too much going on. But like, you look at boomers, dude, and let's just call them, that's our generation.
Maybe it is,
that's our parents.
Maybe that's what it is. It's
what
just
they
like,
do.
yeah.
The TV is the centerpiece to their life. It's insane. Do you ever watch TV other than watch like a sporting event maybe, or a movie with your kids?
Honestly, we don't watch barely any at all anymore.
Exactly.
I mean,
our generation doesn't watch TV, bro.
we have it in our bedroom, and we never even turn it on anymore.
My wife was like,
I think probably once or twice a month.
nothing in the bedroom, honey.
Yeah, once or twice a month we'll probably watch a show.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's probably where or somebody will tell us like, hey, you need to watch the show, and you watch like 3 episodes in one night, and then that's it. You don't watch it again.
I'm the
for like
exact
a
same
month.
way.
Yeah.
It's like guys like us, we create so much content or do so much during the course of the day that sometimes we want to just like de-lever.
Yeah. Every once in a while.
And you want to watch some sort of Pulp Fiction nonsense, kill or be killed, whatever. And that's it. But it's like the boomers, our parents, they sit there and they watch TV. It's the centerpiece of their life.
Yeah, it's crazy. So we'll move on to the next one. Fox 04.
So FOXO4 is a very, very interesting peptide. You know, it's used in a lot of different things. It's a brain peptide. People are using it to cure cancer or to stop cancer. I mean, it has a lot of permutations of what it's available for. The issue with FOX4 is it's very hard to get. It's expensive, and it's also people don't know whether or not it's better to take it orally or to take an injectable. And again, as I think I said this in the very beginning of the podcast, if I didn't, let me say this for everybody. And again, this is in my book and a lot of my work, but in the levels of effectiveness of peptide or bioregulators, injection is always the highest impact delivery system. And the reason that injection is always the highest impact delivery system is because it crosses the blood-brain barrier fastest. So how you can enhance an injectable peptide or bioregulator or anything injection is also to be in a fasted state, because when you don't have insulin competing in your system, the drug can get into what you call parental circulation or portal circulation faster without any competitive or competition from, let's say, insulin, which would be, increasing or spiking blood sugar. The second one would be, obviously, depending on what it is, it would be intranasal, so snorting it, because again, you're going to cross the blood-brain barrier. I've seen a lot of them start going into the... Yes, that will cross the blood-brain barrier. And then right after that is going to be, again, depending on the peptide, depending on the micron size of the molecule, oral or transdermal. So transdermal would be a lotion. Okay. Right. But those are the 4 pathways. You see people now coming up with patches, and there's like troches and stuff like that, where they're like cyclic dexatrin, where they extend the life of it in the mouth. So orally, because a lot of things that are orally, they're just absorbed and boom, they're in the small intestine. But now they're creating They're basically called cyclic versions of them, and they have like a bond removed so that it enhances the half-life so that it stays longer orally digested.
So kind of maybe leads into the next one that's mainly I've seen for skin. It's GHK-CU.
Copper peptide, GHK-CU. So, true story. My business partner and I, my ex-business partner, we invented a company and created a company, invented some products called Royal Blue Serum and Sky Blue Cream. And then our hair product, all of these were patented, was called Oxano Grow. Copper peptide GHK-CU is what we call the sham wow peptide because it does so many things. Like it improves skin elasticity. It improves angiogenesis in the skin. So again, it increases red blood cell formation and volume. And it does all sorts of other amazing things because it's so powerfully angiogenic. So if you put GHK-CU in your scalp, it will regrow hair. Now, it won't regrow a bald person that has no active hair follicles.
Gotcha.
But if you have
Kinda
active hair
stimulate.
follicles, like your hair, my hair, if you use GHK-CU regularly in a transdermal formulation, and this is the most important thing, it has to be a 3% grade or better. And here's the crazy thing. If it's 3% grade or more, it's clinical. So 3% is the maximum you can sell as an over-the-counter peptide formulation as a supplement, which is what we were selling. But there are people now in the clinical space that are selling stronger versions of it, which is great, but it's also a little riskier because at 4% or 5% grade, it's so strong that it can cause dermal abrasion. I mean, it can do a lot of weird stuff. But how you know, for all the women that are in the audience who are listening to this, how you know if your peptide skincare product that says it has copper peptide GHK-CU and it is actually real is if you put it on your face, you have a purple sheen.
Really?
If you don't have a purple sheen, it's not 3% grade and it's most likely useless. And all the high-end cosmetic companies now, L'Oreal, I can't even think of some of the other the names, but they're all putting it has copper peptide GHK-CU in the formulation, but it's like
Just
a
such a small
proprietary
amount
blend.
so they
and
can
there's
say it.
nothing. Exactly. It's a buzzword.
So on that one, I've heard a ton about it from a bunch of different people.
Yeah.
So on that one, I know it does come in an injectable version. Does that do the same thing, or is it actually better if you're using it for skin? Or what would be the benefits is to injecting it as opposed to just putting it on your face?
No, so
or
it's a
rubbing it on
great
your
question.
scalp?
So here's the thing. So copper peptide GHK-CU injected burns like living hell.
Okay.
But not every person feels the burn. So this is my pet theory, but the whiter and lighter your skin, the more ginger you are, the less you're going to feel the burn. The darker, the more melanin you have, the more it will burn you. So most Latin people, African-American people, again, the darker your skin tone, the more it will burn. Because I've literally talked to thousands of people that are like, dude, I want to do this, but it burns so bad. When my wife had her breast augmentation or reconstruction done 2 years ago, my ex-partner made a healing formation that was, off the market type stuff that was amazing. And it, part of it was like GHK-CU, BPC, TB500, and he put some other copper peptides in it, and she would inject it. And she said it burned her so bad that she couldn't do it. And my wife has like the most insane pain tolerance, bro. I mean, she's like, like a guru when it comes to pain tolerance and stuff like that. Like in all of her childbirth, she never had an epidural, and they're all natural. So she's got super, pain tolerance. And she was like, I can't do this. This is insane. And I've injected it also too. I injected it a couple times into my scalp when I was attempting to regrow my hair and doing all these like hair regrowth experiments, and it burns, and it really, really burns. But for some people, again, the lighter the complexion, if you're, like I said, you're blonde hair, strawberry blonde hair, you're kind of a ginger, those people seem to not have the burning, but it does work really well injected. But again, depending on, whether or not you experience the burn, I would just say the transdermal stuff, as long as it's 3% grade, is going to work equally, if not almost.
And so are there any other benefits besides your skin?
It's so strong and angiogenic. So anything that you would want to do to enhance healing or to red blood cell formation is going to
similar to like BPC. And
I know a lot of crazy guys that go to Turkey and get their hair transplants and stuff, and they inject like GHK around the graft areas for literally 3 months, and they all swear by that it strengthens the graft, which in theory it would.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
So I guess the next 2 or 3 are going to be the GHRH. You got -2, -6, and then I know a little bit about them. I think some of them are going to increase your appetite. Some of them are, and they're all made to increased growth hormone,
Yes.
correct? Or
Yeah,
growth hormone releasing peptide.
So you have 6, 2, and I forget the other one, but here's my theory or not theory. Here's my recommendation on those. I would tell people to avoid those altogether now,
Okay.
because
There's just newer ones on the market.
They do dramatically improve growth hormone, but they also increase prolactin and they also increase cortisol, which are obviously negative hormonal side effects. You don't want high increase in prolactin, and as you know, you don't want to increase in cortisol because it's going to affect your sleep. It's going to cause, it's basically overloading your stress pathway response mechanism.
So back in the day, being in the fitness industry,
Yeah,
those are the ones I heard.
Bros, those
that's
are the ones
I heard about first, as
of
far
course,
as like the
of
peptides.
Course. And I use those. I mean, I used those for probably 2 or 3 years, and literally, like they would literally make you feel high. They're so powerful in growth hormone, but.
So really,
again,
now
you would have side effects the next day. You would not sleep.
So now that there's just so many other advanced
totally
ones out there,
avoided.
just kind of avoid.
I mean, they're so avoided that we decided to not put them in the book because it's like there's no recommendation.
Yeah, no, good advice then. Hexarelin, I guess, is probably another version of a.
So Hexarelin is very hard to find now. Like a lot of research chemical companies don't sell it. Clinically, there are compound pharmacies that make it. It's pretty strong. It has a really strong growth hormone agonistic effect. But I would also say that because we know IPA and TESA are so much better and cause no side effects if used in the right way. Whereas Hexa, like on the side effect scale is like a 5, right? So it's like you'll get a 10 growth hormone release, but you'll still have some cortisol and prolactin increases. Whereas with TESA and IPA, there's none. So why would you use it?
Yeah, so it's one of those that are kind of with the GHRH.
Yeah.
So that goes into Ipamorelin, which is probably the most popular, right?
So IPA for sure is, in my opinion, the number one growth hormone agonist peptide to start if you're a newbie to peptides, because it is the only one that does not decrease your body's natural growth hormone production. And there's clinical studies, proving that. And that's why I first started using peptides. It was Ipamorelin in 2004, because one of my buddies was like, dude, you got to check this out. This doesn't affect growth hormone, right? So I was like, no way. And then we started looking into studies, and then I started using it, and you were like, whoa, this is super synergistic with therapeutic testosterone too. But for women who are new to peptides, it's really strong in helping sleep.
Okay.
It's really powerful in helping skin elasticity and improving skin quality. And then fat loss is pretty profound on it too. And again, most women who inject Ipamorelin have no side effects. They just feel better on it, because it does increase well-being too.
Yeah, then that's a good product, definitely.
Yeah, for sure.
I know Gentry just, was interested in one and ordered one. And it wasn't Ipamorelin, it was Tesamorelin. I'm sure we'll get to it, but I'm sure they're pretty much one of the same.
So it's worth it because you guys have a big female audience, because people will ask, what's the dose? Is it the best dose for a woman starting off on Ipamorelin is like 100 to 200 micrograms right before bed at night.
Okay.
Progressing up to 300 micrograms. And you don't need to dose that more than once a day. Now, there are people in the fitness, bodybuilding, performance enhancement world, because there's a short half-life, will say, oh no, you can take Ipamorelin 3 times a day. You can take Ipamorelin, you wake up, take it post-workout and before bed. But for most people in this audience,
also most normal people aren't going to carry it around with
nobody's going to inject themselves 3 times a day.
Carry it to work and try to do it before lunch.
But for the most advanced in the audience, start at 100, but get up to eventually 300 micrograms right before bed, and you will sleep really well.
And is that probably what's ideal, 6 to 12 weeks or?
Yeah, exactly. So if you're brand new, 12 weeks is awesome on Ipamorelin. As you become more experienced and your body develops receptor sensitivity to it, I would say probably your cycle should be no more than 7 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks.
Okay. Glutathione, L-glutathione.
So glutathione is obviously a very, very profound immunodilator. If you take injectable glutathione, which a lot of people take IVs and cocktails with it, it'll make you really, really strong immune-wise, especially in the winter. If you're traveling a lot in the winter, transcontinentally, internationally, you should have a glutathione concoction once a week, or IV once a week.
Yeah, I actually have some that I got from our clinic.
Sure.
I was unsure on, is it okay to take all the time? My
once
doctor.
A week.
Yeah, that's what my doctor was kind of saying. Hey, just once or twice a week at a low dose.
Yeah, once a week. I mean, you can actually take a pretty. So
what's the milligram?
So that's a great point of what he was saying. A microdose if you're healthy. But if you get sick or a nasal infection or sinus infection or something like that, a mega dosage of it, like an IV once a week, is going to keep you very strong.
Okay. And then if I have an injection here and I want to do it intramuscular or something, what's like an ideal dose for something like that,
That's a
just to
good
like,
question. I mean, again, it just depends on if you're immunocompromised or not. If you're just doing a maintenance, probably like, zero point 0.2 or zero point 0.3 micrograms. But like if you're immunocompromised, you can probably take a whole cc.
yeah. So normal
Yeah.
person is just
Yeah.
probably a quarter cc, right?
Yeah, exactly.
What about LL37?
So LL37 is an amazing peptide. So basically, it is an antimicrobial, antipathogenic, and antiviral peptide. So it is very, very powerful. I tell people not to use LL37 until you're so sick that you're about to die. Like you
Okay.
like feel like you've got COVID, you're massively inflamed, your head is you got vertigo, you've got symptoms where you can't walk and everything is off. That's when you inject it because it's so strong. It's not a peptide to be using when you're not seriously compromised. Another reason or another great reason to use it is when you have a severe autoimmune disease.
Gotcha.
So like women that have like lupus or Crohn's, what's the other one they constantly are getting? Epstein-Barr. A lot of these autoimmune diagnoses are just getting to a point where it's like a sham and they have just massive systemic inflammation and they worry a lot.
Yeah.
But LL37 is really, really good for people that have severe autoimmune disease.
Okay. I'm sure a lot of people heard of this one too. It's melanotan 2.
So we should talk about this. So there's two. There's melanotan 1 and melanotan 2.
Melanotan, okay.
Melanotan 2 is very dangerous. And the reason it's very dangerous is in most people that use it, and let's take a step back. So the melanotan peptides, again, 1 and 2, stimulate the melanin corticoid receptor complexes. The melanin corticoid receptor complexes of the body regulate the quality and color of your skin. So obviously the more melanin you have, the darker complected you are. But they also are very profound mitochondrial optimizers and regulators. They do a lot. Melanin does a lot. We don't even understand what melanin does. It's almost like hidden type stuff. But you got to be really cautious when you use melanotan 2 because it can, in higher dosages or too much of a dosage, exacerbate moles and tumors. So it's not going to cause cancer per se, but if you've got like an inflamed mole on your back, which could be like a melanoma or potentially a melanoma, it can exacerbate the formation of those.
Okay.
It also has this weird ability to create nausea. So you have to be super cautious when you use melanotan 2 because, bro, if you're one of those people that's sensitive to the nausea, you literally can dry heave an entire day and feel like you break all your ribs. I mean, I have stories about melanotan 2 from people. Like I tell people, avoid melanotan 2. The other negative about melanotan 2, and this is a super negative, if you take too much, you will literally look like an orange Loompa Loompa. It dyes your skin to the point where it's like you don't look right.
It's almost like I've seen it. It's almost like a purplish.
Dude, it's insane. It's insane. No one should take it.
Gentry, being kind of addicted to tanning, and
sure,
she was always interested in it. She
skin,
took it one time tried to do it one
Right.
time or 1 week.
Yeah.
And same thing. She got so sick. She's like, it's just not even, I don't care.
No,
There's nothing.
No.
that's
So,
worth
so
it.
that's good because she's sensitive to it. And a lot of people aren't. In the bodybuilding performance enhancement, arena for obviously competitive people, right? Where they have
Taking
to be
it
dark
right
on
before
stage.
show. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So they were doing that. But I also saw people who overdid it and they became so dark and it was horrible. And you're right. They look like orange or blue
almost
or
like
purplish
purple,
Oompa
yeah.
Loompas. Now, we got to talk about melanotan 1 because melanotan 1 is probably my favorite peptide. So melanotan 1 will darken your skin to your maximum level of tanning. So you will never go beyond like whatever your melanin level is. So you'll always look like slightly, whatever your level of melanin is, it'll take you to the optimal skin level.
Okay.
And again, I liken it to being maximally protected from the sun's rays.
Is that going to have the same effect on maybe overproducing like melanin or a mole or
No,
or
so it has
make it
none
too-
of those effects. Now, it's already, and a lot of people don't know this, dude, it's a pharmaceutically FDA approved peptide.
Really?
It's called Brolaminitide. Most people don't know this. It's outrageous how expensive it is. But the one thing that it does, and I wrote about this in my first book in 2018, and I've now gotten thousands of people to corroborate, it enhances consciousness. So if you meditate or you're contemplative or introspective, or you just say sit in nature every single day, and you inject a microdose of melanotan, dude, you can get into the zone, you can get into the headspace, you can get into mind silence or stillness or whatever you want to call it super fast with it. Now, when I first started writing about that in like 2016 and 2017, I thought maybe I got to be cautious about this because I don't want people to think I'm crazy or like super woo into this. But then I started asking my friends who did meditate, like, hey man, will you just play around with this and tell me what you got? And not a single person has ever come back to me and said this is insane stuff. Like it's incredible. So definitely for you and Gentry, I would definitely recommend getting some and experimenting and taking low dosages. It's also really good to take right in the morning before you go out into like sun. Like if you do sun gazing or just sit in nature when the sun's up, it's amazing.
So it is
Amazing.
going to increase your skin color a little bit too.
Very slightly. So like me right now, like, so this is literally like 1 or 2 microdoses a week year round of melanotan 1. And it's very, very low. I mean, before I started using melanotan, bro, I was a white boy from the Midwest. I mean, I was so white, but like this is like permanent now. And I've been using it since 2009.
We're both pretty pale.
Yeah.
As far I've just been at the lake a lot, in the last couple of years, but we're really pale.
So dude, melanotan 1 will literally darken your skin. But again, it's not going to make you like look tan where people are like, hey bro, you've been going to a tanning bed.
It's just going to
It's making you insulated from the sun, from the negative effects of the sun.
When you say it enhances like consciousness and improves meditation, would it give you more energy for like in a work setting, or is it more like just to kind of
puts you in the
creative
zone.
mode?
It puts you in the zone. That's what I would say. Like, I mean, Dr. What's his name? Seeds. He's big in melanotan 1. Like he has all these like crazy clinical protocols of using it. He says it can enhance sexual function. Let's just put it this way, dude. I've been using that peptide now for 15 years and I still find it does crazy shit that I never even thought. It's just an amazing peptide. It definitely calms and centers you.
That's cool.
Like you will be like, I mean, dude, honestly, like I was a maniac at one time. And when I started taking that, like a nuke could go off next to me, dude. And I'll be like, that's cool.
Every young man is.
Yeah. I mean,
at some point,
especially when you're attempting to like use therapeutic testosterone and modulate your dosages and be balanced and stuff like that. But I was always just an aggressive person. And since I started using that, it's just, dude, it's incredible. I mean, like I said, I mean, I rave about it. I've told thousands of people about it.
So if I want to start out with a microdose,
0.25,
what would that?
0.25. And
0.25.
Do it like, of like say a 10 milligram vial.
I was about to say how many milligrams?
10 milligram vial. So you would be like do that on Monday and do it on Thursday.
0.25 micrograms.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. But like just do it on a Monday and do it on a Thursday and then just do that for like about a month and tell me what you feel.
Okay, sweet. I'll give it a try. MGF, IGF-1.
So IGF-1, LGF-1, all these basically interstitial growth fluid or factor peptides are potentially amazing. Here's the problem with those peptides. They become inert in production and destabilize so rapidly fast that if you don't know who's making it for you, the likelihood that you're getting an inert peptide is very high. Like in the bro communities, like it's very difficult. Like IGF-1, LF3, if you can get it, is like amazing for building muscle and enhancing growth hormone secretion. But in most people's experience, you get that peptide and it hasn't been compounded or manufactured correctly. And so it degrades really fast. And even when it is made right, it doesn't have a long half-life. So it's like if you put it in a vial and now you have it's reconstituted or whatever, you got to use it all in the first couple of days or you're not going to get anything out of it. So I usually tell people, where this is going, just use growth hormone. There's no really beneficial effect of using it if you already have access to growth hormone.
Sounds like some of these are just basically outdated. There's newer versions out that are going to do a lot better with least amount of side effects.
I wouldn't say it's outdated. It's just impossible to get it in a clinically efficacious way.
Got it. Okay, what about mod GRF?
So modified GRF. So that's another one very similar. It's hard to get it. It's amazing if you can actually get it. So it's a really powerful muscle builder. So like you would inject that into lagging muscle body parts. So like if you were, and I'll just talk for bodybuilders for a second, but if you were like a competitive bodybuilder and your upper chest was lagging, you would literally inject modified PEG right here or modified MG.
So it's like a localized muscle.
Yeah. So it will, obviously you still got to train, you got to eat, you got to do all the things right beyond, hormones and stuff like that. But like, it'll definitely enhance like site specific muscle production. But again, it's really difficult to make for me or for knowledgeable people to recommend it because it's really hard to get it in a stable form.
Yeah. What about, I've heard this from, a couple, of our friends that are women, MOTS-C.
MOTS-C is amazing. So MOTS-C is a mitochondrial optimizing peptide. Here's the problem with MOTS-C, and it's not a problem. It works better in fatter, insulin-resistant people than it does in people like you and me. And again, it's common sense, right? And nobody's talking about this, but I've been talking about this for 4 years. The more optimized mitochondrially you are, and that's obviously from being lean, from being hormonally optimized, from doing the things that we know that you need to do, like red light and cold plunge and eating right and living insulin controlled and stuff like that, your mitochondria are already at a higher level. So if you inject MOTS-C, you'll get a little bit of energetic production. But if you're a dumpster fire and you have no mitochondrial optimization and you start injecting MOTS-C, you're like, boom, bro. They start feeling like we do for a minute. It doesn't last long until they change their lifestyle, but they get that energetic fire of like all their mitochondrial turning on. So it's like, if you're going to compare mitochondrial peptides, because we got to get to that one. I told you about it last night, SS31. SS31's here. MOTS-C is right here. And then 5-amino is down here. As far as like actual feeling the mitochondrial turning on.
Got it. Okay. Well, kind of leads me into my next one, which I do have some experience with, is NAD+.
Yeah.
And again, kind of like we talked about, I guess some people see a lot more of a difference than maybe some other people, but I've seen a huge benefit from it. Just energy level in general, cognitive function is been a huge improvement in all the other, along with all the other stuff I was doing. Again, I didn't start taking it once I was pretty optimized, just still kind of maybe a little bit low energy, but it was definitely one of those things that I could notice a huge difference in. I continue to take it today.
I'm definitely going to, I already told you, I'm going to connect you with Dr. Shi, because you and him will geek out on NAD+, dude. He'll come here and
I'll do the test, and
his little Chinese accent, he'll blow your mind with NAD, but like he'll just be like, oh, you bring me on the podcast, I'll give you the test.
I'll get him.
No, he's
I want to take it anyways. And
yeah,
the one question I do have is, I've been, I started with IVs, again, very inconvenient, very painful, and you're just uncomfortable when you do it. And the injections I switched to, and I still felt a huge benefit from them. But is it like the other peptides where I maybe need to take a break? And
probably.
At some point, right? I can't just take.
I mean, again, if you're not overdosing and you're just taking a therapeutic microdose, once or twice a week, I don't think you have to truly come off. I mean, would it make sense to come off for 2 or 3 weeks, every 4 months in a year? Of course. Right. But it's not going to matter, that much. The other thing you should look into, and again, I'll connect you with those guys too, is the guys that own Push Patch. So that's Dr. Roy Korth. He's like the biggest patch NAD guy in the world. But, a lot of his people love it. I told you my wife loved that. But I used it for literally I already told you. My experience for the audience is I do nothing with NAD. It literally does nothing for me. I used the patch for 6 weeks. I've injected it. I shouldn't say it does nothing. Obviously, if I do an IV, I feel better over a day or two, especially if you've been jet lagged, right? You've come from when you're like, your body's clock and circadian rhythm is screwed up. But I just don't feel NAD supplementation, whether it's a patch or just a regular injection. I don't feel much. I think Gentry was the same way. Right?
She was, yeah. She did IVs, she did injections. Again, it's not nothing, but it's not like worth it to her. Yeah, it's not worth it to her to go try to inject something every day. Like that's not.
Whereas with you, it's like boom.
Yes, and so I think that's what everybody probably needs to realize too is, a lot of this stuff, every single person's different.
Totally.
And although most of it might work on someone, some people just might not have that much of effect, or maybe you already have super high NAD levels and it just doesn't really help you.
Well, that's what I told you. So it's like, I knew intuitively that I did. And then when I did the test with he told me that I was the highest person he's ever tested. Like I scored off the chart. He was asking me, he's like, are you taking injections? Are you supplementing? I go, bro, I don't use any of it. I said, I've never felt it when I did. Well, he was like, well, there you go. So it's like, that's why I like the guy, because like he verified his scientific conclusion.
That, and maybe doing some other mitochondrial stuff, maybe his supported that, where you just don't need it. Maybe.
And we should talk about this, but dude, it's the metformin. I've been on the metformin for so long.
So you know what? We probably need to do that. We're in the, we just passed the M's. I know it's not really a peptide. Is it a peptide?
Yeah, for sure. No, it's not. But
we should talk about
plant.
it.
Yeah, let's talk about it. So metformin, and again, I'll give you ample scientific evidence and the article, which again debunks every negative side effect or angle that people in the, let's say in the mainstream community have come about with metformin. But metformin is a very, very powerful, again, it's a plant, grows in France, in the south of France, in the fields wildly. And it's been a prescribed medication for type 2 diabetics since literally the 30s. It's the number one most studied medication in the history of the world. And as I was telling you last night, if you give it to flaming dumpster fire, again, type 2 diabetic, insulin resistant, metabolically deranged people, even if they continue with their garbage lifestyle, they will live longer on metformin in a garbage lifestyle than a non-metabolically deranged or insulin resistant people who's not on metformin. So they have all those studies that show that. So giving metformin to people like us who are already living insulin controlled, who are already doing all the things right, it does a million things. And again, it's all in my article. It's a 10,000 word article. But what it profoundly does is it crushes, if not eliminates, all systemic inflammation. So if you have inflammation in your brain, which you don't even know about just because you don't sleep well, you drink too much caffeine, blah, 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 it gets rid of that. And then as I was also telling you, and this is the most profound scientifically understood thing, is it increases Akkermansia in the microbiome. And Akkermansia is the healthy gut bacteria that it makes you impervious to all forms of dysbiosis, SIBO, all these people that have gut issues would not have gut issues if they were using metformin.
And so is it still a prescription?
It is a prescription, but that's the cool thing is it's now off patent. Nobody cares. All the telehealth companies
so it can be compounded
literally do it. Yeah, but you guys can compound it all day long. But I mean, dude, there's tons of research chemical companies selling it. All the offshore pharmacies sell it. So I mean, most
is
people
it an injection or is it a?
No, it's a tablet.
It's a tablet.
Swallowable tablet.
So what dosage would I take if starting out? Because actually one of those other things that was a huge benefit when I started the NAD, or maybe a little bit before, is we pretty much tried to do every single thing we could to reduce inflammation.
Yeah.
Diet. And I did see the most noticeable benefits in my lifestyle, energy, once I tried to pull all that inflammation out.
Sure.
It had a huge impact on me. Even when I was sat with my doctor and I was like, oh, I eat healthy. And he's like, I know you eat healthy, but he's like, let's try to do something and pull out all the foods that cause inflammation.
Sure.
And I couldn't believe it. I was like, I kind of, at first I was like, yeah, whatever, didn't really think it was going to have that much of an impact. But now that I come to find out, or now that I, talking to people like you and a lot of other people, inflammation is just one of the most disruptive thing that somebody could have.
Yeah. So I would say, how much do you weigh right now?
About fluctuate between 185 and 188 or something. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think you can start at 500 milligrams AM and PM.
Okay.
I don't think it's going to be a problem for you. You're so low inflammation and low body fat that you probably will have no issue. But what most people who aren't like us, when they start metformin, it does cause like a mild, I wouldn't call it nausea, but you just feel weird because again, it's going to work killing all the nasty shit in your stomach.
So it'll just kind of make you uneasy a little bit.
You start. But it goes away. I mean, it literally goes away. I mean, I think like a woman smaller, a gentry, my wife, Monica, like they can start at 250.
Okay.
But for you, you're big enough and healthy enough that I think you can start at 500, again, AM, PM. Now they do make an XR version, which is an extended release. And that is enterically coated so that it's less invasive or less harmful for that feeling.
Just breaks down over the day.
Yeah, but I mean, again, dude, if you were a dumpster fire, I would tell you to get on XR because those people are like, oh my God, bro, I got diarrhea. It kills me. I had to stop. And that's the sad part is like I tell these people when they want to stop it because they don't feel good. I'm like, no, you got to keep going.
They didn't take it long enough to see the maximum benefit.
Exactly. And
that's it's almost like if they're feeling that way, it's probably going to work even. They know they need to take it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, that is a supplement / drug that has to be used. In fact, just to mention it, there is a study going on right now. It's called the TAME trial. And it's the first ever study in the history of medicine that is actually looking at metformin as an anti-aging medication to see what it does. And it's already 4 years in. And I know people that are involved in the study and they're all telling me, well, it just solidifies everything you've ever said because they're not going to believe this stuff when it comes out. But it is so strong. I've never met anyone who hasn't used it, who hasn't noticed profound effects from it. And as I tell you, the final thing to say is that all women who have any kind of autoimmune disease or diagnosis should be on it because it just crushes systemic inflammation. They feel so much better. I mean, I've talked to women, very advanced women who were on like this medication, that medication. They had this diagnosis, that diagnosis. And as soon as they started taking 250 milligrams of metformin AM and PM, and then usually they titrate up to 500 milligrams within a month, dude, all of their inflammation and all of their autoimmune shit is gone. That's how strong it is. And again, as I told you, the medical system doesn't want people on metformin because it would literally prevent more people from going to the hospital. It's that effective. It literally does so many great things. It will make you impervious to basically all sickness and illness. You'll never get any kind of gut, inflammation issues. You're never going to feel sick. You won't feel sick when you're on it.
And it's a plant.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'll definitely try it. That's something, if something can reduce inflammation, I've already seen benefits from, other things that reduce inflammation. And so I'm, 100% going to try that. I'll reach out to my doctor and probably get that this week.
For sure.
What about oxytocin?
So oxytocin, it's a hit or miss peptide. It can be really, really good, but it's also one of those things where it's like when you inject, it has to be injected. Don't let anybody tell you you can take it intranasally or take it orally. You technically could take it intranasally if you woke up right in the morning and you were completely fasted and you did it. But here's the problem with oxytocin. So I've used oxytocin probably 15 times in my life, and 7 times my wife and I were like, whoa, we had pair bonding and had amazing sex and super connected and intimate. And the other 7 times we felt nothing. And the reason that is because when it does cross the blood-brain barrier, if it's dealing with anything else like insulin, just anything else that might be going on in your bloodstream, it can become inert. So it's one of those things where like it might work amazing and it might not work. It's the same thing with PT-141, which I'm sure you want to probably talk about. So PT-141
That was
also,
actually, yeah. Well, PT-21, is that the same thing? Or
no, so that's
okay,
different.
we're not, yeah.
But PT-141 is basically the sexual stimulation drug. So for a man, it will strengthen erections and it can actually make you have a shorter refractory period. Your erection can be harder and firmer for longer. It actually, if you overdose it, for guys that it works in, it can actually cause priapism. So they can have like an erection that lasts like 6 hours, which is no bueno.
Same as like Viagra, or, some
I
of this
mean, it's
other.
way stronger than those things. But yeah, I mean, if you took way too much Viagra, you could probably do that. But the bottom line is that it's just like it's the same. So it's in the same melanin corticoid receptor complex peptide pathways like melanotan 1 and 2. So if you take too much of it or you're sensitive to it, you can be sick as hell. So when I gave it to my wife, she was like Gentry. I mean, dude, she couldn't leave the bed for literally like 7 hours. I mean, she was so bad. We were obviously going to try to do it because there's a lot of women. I mean, they prescribe it to women for sexual dysfunction. So for a lot of women, it really makes their orgasm stronger. They're more sensitive clitorally. But for other people who are really sensitive to it, it just literally makes you feel nauseous and sick. So I always tell people,
Which defeats the whole purpose if
exactly,
that happens.
just be very cautious when you use those. Start very low dosage because if you do get sick, you can really get sick on that.
Bioregulator called Pancreagen.
Pancreagen. So yeah, so it's a very powerful bioregulator for the pancreas. So just like metformin helps with insulin sensitivity and suppressing blood glucose and getting rid of systemic inflammation and improving the gut, that is a bioregulator to strengthen the pancreas. So remember we talked about the screen and porch door as like the chemoreceptors in your pancreas. So if you're constantly eating shit food, sugar, soda, all that, eventually they break. If you take that and you still have strong, semi-functional or, let's just say average chemoreceptor signaling in the pancreas, it'll strengthen it as you get older. So it's pretty strong stuff.
Yeah, the bioregulator seems super interesting as far as like how it can be tissue specific.
Dude,
to
in
something. That is really
2025,
crazy.
my team, they already know like it's all bioregulators all the time. We're writing articles about them to expose them to the world because there's tons of people in the United States right now that are buying them because they get effect from them, but there's no science. There's like no data. I mean, again, unless you can what am I saying? Translate Russian documents.
Yeah, I was about to say from overseas.
You can't understand what's out there, but there are people out there, and as you know now, AI tools that can. So we're going to translate all those documents and then we're going to write deep articles. And then I'm going to interview. Hopefully we're going to be able to, with Trump and RFK coming in now, we'll be able to get access to those Russian people now because hopefully the war will end really fast and we'll be able to talk to those people now.
Yeah, that's really awesome. What about another bioregular, Pinion?
So dude, that's a whole nother podcast too. So Pinion strengthens and improves the foundation of basically our pineal gland. So when you use pineal, now I have an article and I'm happy to share that with you guys to your audience if you want to link to it in the podcast. But Pinion, I mean, just get really crazy with Pinion, but Pinion just will enhance consciousness because again, it's basically what they're saying is it's strengthening the pineal gland. Most people in the United States, especially, or in the West, our pineal glands are pretty much calcified. And they're calcified due to the fluoridization in the water. They're calcified just due to the environment. There's, again, so many contaminants and particulates in our environment that calcifies the pineal gland. And then plus two, over time, the pineal gland has just become less effective because we're not in touch with nature. We're not connected to ground, Mother Earth, whatever you want to say. We're in such, artificially induced climates and environments now. So it just doesn't work as much. But if you take pineal on, again, it's theory, it will light it up more. It'll awaken it more. It'll make it more, more like it was when humans were first created or first, became indigenous to Earth, where it was much more functioning. Now, I should add there are people out there in the life extension world that are using high dose melatonin with Epithalon, and they say they can leave their bodies. They can like astral project. So, and when I say high dose melatonin, dude, I'm talking about like people taking 3 or 4 grams of the powder and like not snorting it, but lozenging it, getting it in their throat right before they go to bed, and then taking it with Epithalon. And they're basically saying that, again, they can astral project. They can literally consciously leave their physical body. There's a ton of people. You can Google that. It's online. I've never done that myself, but I have used Epithalon, and the only thing that I would actually physically notice is that my sleep was better.
Okay.
Probably, which means you probably are dreaming deeper too.
Yeah. Interesting. So another bioregulator, Prostamax.
So Prostamax is like Libidon. It's a prostate bioregulator. It's not, theoretically, it's not as strong as Libidon, but you can definitely use it more often. So they say to use Libidon 2 10-day sessions a year with Libidon. And Prostamax, I want to say you can probably use it monthly. It's not as strong, but again, if you think about it, what is the prostate? We don't really understand the prostate, but what we do understand about the prostate is we know that as it gets bigger, it prevents us from peeing in a strong urine flow. So if you use Prostamax monthly as you're an aging man, it should reduce the size of the prostate so that you're able to piss more freely and probably not wake up as much going in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom.
Interesting, because every man out there at some point is going to have prostate issues.
I have it right now. I am, full disclosure, depending on how much liquid I drink in a day, I have to piss twice or once. So it's like, I've got it down to like, if I go to bed at 9:30, 9:45, and I wake up at 3, then I've slept 4.5 hours or, close to 5 hours, and I'm pretty refreshed. And then if I drank way too much that day, I might have to wake up again at 5:30 instead of waking up at like 5:50.
I do the same. I do. If I drink a ton, which I normally do, it's twice.
Exactly.
And if I kind of, limit it a little bit or limit it later in the day, then it's only once.
Exactly. We're exact same. And that's like, and that's like I say, if you're 40 and over, that's most likely, if you're healthy, that's when it is, because you're drinking enough water. So it's kind of damned if you don't, damned if you do, damned if you don't. In that if you're dehydrated and not getting enough water, which is not healthy for you anyway, then you might only piss once. But is it really worth it to be dehydrated all the time?
So this is a really interesting one that I started hearing about, and you kind of explained a lot to me about, is retatrutide.
Yeah. So dude, man, retatrutide is a fantastic peptide. Here's the truth. Retatrutide is an Eli Lilly created drug. It's already in stage 3 of trials. The expectation is that it will be available to the public. And by the way, dude, when it comes out, if you think they're robbing people on terzapatide, imagine what they charge people for retatrutide. Now, I'll send you guys a link to a study that was just on Twitter last week. They just did literally a 9-month trial with semaglutide, which is obviously Ozempic, Mounjaro, and then retatrutide, which again is not clinically approved by the FDA yet. But again, it's a Lilly drug, and Lilly is competing with itself with terzapatide. And dude, the effects that they had in metabolically deranged people are profound. I mean, it destroys Ozempic and terzapatide.
And so the interesting thing you were telling me, because, you said it reduces inflammation, it has all these other effects, that it doesn't really affect your appetite as much, but you'll still get some of the positive effects of what you would get from some of the other ones.
And that's what's so crazy about that GLP-1 peptide is that most people who, let's just put it this way, if you're going to use retatrutide, most likely you're familiar with Ozempic and Mounjaro. You've probably used both already. And you hear from your friends or from, doctors or whoever that are using it, experimentally in their pet animal or their research animal, that you're used to like the profound appetite suppression of both of those drugs, right? And then if you've used terzapatide, you also notice it enhances your metabolism a little bit. Dude, when you go on retatrutide, the problem is, and again, it's the same thing in the clinical community, is that, they recommend high dosages to make money. The recommended dose for retatrutide in the trials is 4 milligrams to 6 milligrams a week. Bro, if you and I took that much at that drug, we would, I've done it. I mean, when I first started experimenting with it last year, I was one of probably the first people in the entire world to do it, because I started in July of 2023 and I was taking 5 milligrams. And dude, all it did was it made my metabolism so fast that I literally was starving. It was the craziest thing. So, at first I was like, well, wait a minute, this is insane. There's no way fat people can take this because they're just going to want to eat all the time. Like, even if it is enhancing their metabolism, the trade-off is they'll be eating too much. What I didn't know was the dose was too high, right? So then we started experimenting, we started playing with it, and now I've been using it for literally about 14 months. And we got it down to where, as I was telling you last night, where if you use it every day or every other day, and again, most people are going to use it every other day because they don't want to inject themselves every day. But, and this is important, and we probably can get to this anyway, just to answer it right now. If you know what you're doing when you're using peptides, you can literally put 5 peptides in one shot and inject it all at one time.
That's something that we didn't go over, and I was curious about that.
Yes.
Are you able to put, it doesn't matter which ones it does.
Dude,
they're not going to
100%.
compete with each other.
I'll tell you what it is, what I do. So when I use my retatrutide, so I have everything down based on whether it's a fasting day. So my lifestyle, because we haven't talked about this, is I fast every other day. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I lift. Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday, I fast. Tuesday, Thursdays, depending on how ripped and lean I want to be, I'll fast a whole day or I'll just fast 20 hours, right? And then I eat obviously a very low, mostly meat, vegetables, kind of like what you ate last night,
Sure.
when I do break my fast. And then on the weekends when I'm fasting, I always leave the night available to family and get-togethers and celebrating with family. Yeah, exactly. So you're not that Spartanistic, but the truth is that when I inject my retatrutide, it's always on my training days. So this is what I inject. So everybody on the audience knows, I inject melanotan 1, a microdose, retatrutide, SS31, and sometimes, depending on if I'm injured or whatever, I'll throw a little bit of BPC and TB5, and it's combined into it. It's all in one vial. It's all in one needle, 1 cc insulin syringe. And by the time I fill them all up with microdoses, I'm probably like 6 or 7 on the syringe, right? And I inject right here, I'll inject right here. But you absolutely can do that. Now, the rule is there are some peptides that you cannot combine. You don't want to take a GH agonist peptide with like a brain stimulating peptide and combine them, right? But you can take all the GH agonist peptides plus BPC and TB500 plus a mitochondrial optimizer like SS31, MOTC. There's others, 5-AOD. So it really just depends on what you're doing. Now, the other thing, and this is what your audience is going to ask about, is like, because this is a major question that people get. Bro, these peptides blow me away. There's so many. They're so good. Oh my God, I want to take them all at once. I've got this thing going on, this thing going on, this thing going on. How can I just shotgun and take them all at once? And I always say, whoa, ease back. Like, most important thing is, what is the primary issue you have in your life right now? Most people, it's fat. I'm fat. I'm metabolically deranged. I've got too much visceral body fat. Too much inflammation. So focus on reducing body fat and use peptides that will help you with that, right? So the 2 primary pathways of that would be GH agonist peptides, TESA, IPA, CJC, and then mitochondrial optimizing, MOTC, 5-amino. What was the other one that we just talked about? I forgot, but you would use those, right? So it's like, but what if I'm hurt, bro? Like, I want to lose fat and I want to, heal an injury, right? So I will always say that's the exception. The BPC, TB500, GHK, the ShamWow peptides, sure, you can use those while you're at the same time, like attempting to lose fat. But like, what you also have to understand, and this is where people get confused, is if you're attempting to heal an injury, you got to eat carbs and, get stuff to heal. You can't heal an injury by just taking BPC and TB500, although it will help somewhat if you're not eating carbs and not eating at all to heal, right? So again, what is most important to you? If it's fat loss, then focus on fat loss, living insulin controlled, controlling your carbohydrate consumption, using obviously the retatrutide or the tirzepatide if you have access to that in addition, but not focused on healing because you need food and carbohydrates to truly heal, especially when it's a really serious soft tissue injury. But that's kind of like the extent of it. You can absolutely combine certain peptides in the same syringe, but like I said, just don't go willy-nilly crazy and try to put everything in one syringe.
C-Link and C-Max.
So C-Link and C-Max are, and we'll throw Dihexan in there too. So all 3
Go ahead,
of those
because I
peptides,
skipped that one. Yeah.
So all 3 of those peptides are profound cognitive enhancing peptides. We'll get to it. I don't want to not mention tesofensine. We kind of talked about it for a second already, but not in depth. All 3 of those peptides, Dihexa, C-Link, and C-Max, all improve cognitive function, and they also can restore, you kind of mentioned it earlier before, they can restore dopamine signaling pathways. Not dramatically like testosterone does, but enough that people who are cognitively impaired from, let's say, lack of sleep, or you already said it, they were on SSRIs for a long time, and they have issues, they're really good for that. In my experience of those 3, I would quantify them as Dihexa 1, C-Link 2, C-Max 3.
I've read that one of them was kind of more geared toward like anxiety and have more calming effect.
That's absolutely going to be C-Max.
Okay.
Selank and dihexa are cognitive restorers and cognitive enhancers. For all the people in the listening audience, before you ask the dose, start low, go slow, because
Especially
some
with something
people,
like that, yeah.
dude, I've seen some people take a absolute microdose that you and I probably wouldn't even feel on dihexa and be like, the lights come on. I have to take a lot. For me to even feel either of them, I have to take a heroic dose of both. And a heroic dose of dihexa is literally like 40 to 50 milligrams. I mean, I'm serious. I know people that
Is that a
inject
capsule or
half a
injection?
milligram. It
Yeah.
can be both. The compound formulators usually make capsules of it. So you can take it orally. And that's why I like the nootropic peptides, because they can be used, most of them, in oral, intranasal.
And then the oral stuff is pretty much just as effective on the cognitive.
It is. I mean, I would say, again, injection will always be highest impact, but for
it's
you
still
and I
effective.
to notice like a difference, probably not. So dihexa is my favorite. And again, if I would have had access to dihexa this morning before this podcast, I would have taken it. But instead, I told you I took tesofensine. We'll talk about that in a second. And then again, Selank, and then C-Max. And you're right, C-Max is better for people that have mild depressive disorder. They may have like lack of motivation. I'll tell you what, a lot of people use C-Max, video gamers use C-Max, because they're constantly, professional ones. They're constantly playing video game and they're on console and they're in those weird environments and stuff. And they get what is called seasonal defective disorder or whatever, because they're constantly in rooms with light and blue light and all that stuff. And they use C-Max to like.
So would somebody use all three together, or would it be more wise to start with like, I know I always see Selank and C-Max combined in one.
I think people
vial.
do all three of them combined, but again, it's the whole effect of like, how would you know what works if you don't know? You start everything in isolation and then just record and see what happens. Teso. Let's talk about tesofensine.
Yeah,
So tesofensine is my favorite. It's not technically considered a nootropic peptide, or it's a small molecule, kind of like 5-amino is. And it's an oral capsule, but it stimulates brain-derived neurotropic factor, BDNF, which for most people that are in the space and your listening audience that are like into BDNF is what increases flow state. So like if you want to be super creative and full of creative expression, you want your BDNF receptors in the brain to just be firing at all times. BDNF is also enhanced from fasting. There's a lot of ways you can increase it naturally. True story, when your team wins and it's a big game and you get all excited, your team won, like BDNF is firing. But tesofensine has this incredible ability to increase BDNF expression and cell firing or cell signaling in the brain. So like when you take it, and as I was telling you this, in the clinical community, they give 250 micrograms or 500 micrograms. Definitely start at 250. I started at 500.
I heard it's pretty powerful. So yeah, people need to really
I
start.
literally know people who took in fact, there's a doctor that I'm going to recommend for you guys to come on the show. You guys might know her right now. Her name is Dr. Stephanie Rimka. She has a huge audience too, but she'll be amazing for your listeners and for Gentry. But she has stories about like, because I told her about this like 4 years ago, and she started taking it, and she was like, I remember she called me. Well, she was texting me. She's like, I'm calling you. You better answer. And I answered, and she's like, bro, tesofensine, I haven't slept in 2.5 days.
God.
But she's like, I'm laying at the ceiling thinking about my next presentation, or like, I'm so wired. I feel so good. She was like, I wasn't even tired. But so if you're one of those people that has like a really powerful receptor sensitivity to
That
it,
would
dude,
be me for sure. Yeah, I would.
Yeah, so 250, and maybe, because it comes in capsules, maybe just half it. So take 125 when you first started. But I'm not kidding you, man. Like the first month that you take that it's something you'll remember the rest of your life, because you really do feel literally amazing. It's like it enhances well-being in 30 minutes. From 30 minutes, if you take it first in the morning, right when you wake up, in 30 minutes, you feel like it's not euphoric, like you're on MDMA or something like that, but it's amazing. And it lasts all day.
The BDNF, what I've read, again, just when you see comments in forums or Reddit or some other places, the C-Link C-Max increases BDNF a little bit also. Is there any truth to the hair loss thing with BDNF, or like it's just
there's
internet.
lots of rumors. No, well, so I mean, like
I haven't seen any data. It's just people that.
So it's all of the above, and yes, it can happen. But here's the truth: like even with GLP-1 peptides, that's a massive side effect, is hair loss. And do you know why that is? They're not eating
malnutrition.
protein.
Yeah, the malnutrition side of it.
They're not eating protein. So as soon as you stop getting enough protein, which, if you're fat, you're not eating at all, your hair falls out.
So it goes back to the doctor that texted you and said, I haven't slept in 2 days, probably hasn't eaten much, just wired.
Wasn't eating
So
at
yeah,
all.
so
Wasn't eating at all. Just was so fired up. I mean, she told me, she was like, dude, because I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. She's like, no, don't apologize. Like I've never felt this good. But
definitely
if you're like
not,
that.
definitely not long lasting. You can't do that.
Well, here's the crazy part about it, and we should talk about this. And this is in all the studies. It doesn't downregulate, so it lasts forever. You could take it forever, dude. It keeps working. And you can come off of it cold turkey and you don't have desensitization. So nobody like freaks out like caffeine or something like that.
That's what's weird about it, right? You can have all those positive effects, but you don't, when you come off, you don't like crave it or need to
Dude, I'm not kidding
like a
you.
cup of coffee. You don't
I took
feel...
it for 18 months consecutively when I first started taking it back in 2020. I started taking it, I remember clear as day. It was in October during the COVID debacle. And it was right when everybody was starting to find out about like what was coming with the V. And I was the guys in Miami, one of my clinics were like, dude, you gotta start taking this. And so I started taking it. My wife started taking it. And I mean, dude, it was incredible. I'm a huge Cincinnati Bengals fan. And when they lost in the Super Bowl, I was like, we went to this big party in Miami and, they lost in the last play and blah, blah, blah. And I was just like, for 10 minutes, I was devastated. And I was like, I told my wife, I'm like, man, the next 2 days, it's going to be hard for me. And I didn't even feel it. Like I didn't even care. And I was like, what is making me feel so good? And I'd only been on it for like a month and a half, but I knew it. Yeah, exactly. And so like, I was like, holy crap. But every person that I know that has taken it, it's only positive. And again, when I went off of it, I was like, you know what, I'm stopping this because A, I wanted to prove that I wasn't addicted to it. And B, I just wanted to see if there would be any downsides. Nothing. And I have not taken it. I told you I took 250 this morning. I carry it with me in my supplement bag just to always have it on command, but I have not taken it in 4 months.
But do you not get addicted to the feeling of like being more productive kind of thing?
No, because it may be. I mean,
you know what I mean? I guess like
it's a great question. I don't really think of it that way. I probably could be if I was, but I mean, dude, I just have my life so regimented on being productive.
I'm the same way too. I'm kind of
that I just don't really notice it. But like, I mean, I definitely know that I'm really energized for this podcast. Like, I mean, I'm a pretty energized guy, but like, there's no question that it's helping me. And I was texting Candace this morning and she could read our text back and forth. And I was probably like, oh, yeah, this is going to be amazing. And that's definitely from the Tesofensi. You just feel so good about life. It's incredible.
Semaglutide.
Well, let's talk about it for a second because it's worth talking about. So I actually tell people now that if you're using semaglutide, you're A, not working with the right doctor, or B, not informed well enough about GLP-1 peptides because it's worthless now.
With all the stuff in the marketplace. Gentry, it was all nausea. Like there was no other benefit. I mean, it really affected her life so much that it just wasn't worth taking anymore. And she just got off of it. And then she started Trizepatide. She's like, this is so much better. I mean, again, she'll get a little bit, maybe the day after the shot, maybe just a little bit. And then it'll kind of subside.
I mean, I would tell her, so she, 100% she's right. I would just tell her to look at her doses. Well, once you guys go on Retatrutide, you're not even going to care.
Yeah, she's taking a micro dose already.
Yeah, you guys aren't even going to care because Red is so much better. But basically, the only people that I would say SEMA is still good for is people in third world countries that can't get access to the others.
Got it.
Because now you can go in Mexico, you can go in anywhere in Latin America, and dude, they're selling pill capsules of semaglutide. Which, by the way, we should talk about that. It's not as effective as the injectable kind. It works okay, though, right? So again, a doctor was going to say, hey, some of it is better than none for a person who's morbidly obese.
In another country, you can't get access to the injections.
Exactly.
Yeah, makes sense. Another one that's probably pretty well known is Cerebrolysin.
So Cerebrolysin is an interesting peptide because the clinical community created Cerebrolysin to mimic Ipamorelin because Ipamorelin wasn't supported by the clinical community. So as I was telling you last night,
this is the one that's available. Most people will know if
in the clinical space, if they've been using
clinic,
peptides, they know what Cerebrolysin is. But again, if you do the Pepsi challenge and you take Ipa, and again, it doesn't whether you're getting it from research or compound. If you do both of them side by side, well, let's take a step back. If you look at the chemical formulations of them, they're literally almost a mimic of each other. So a pharmacist is going to say, there's no way, bro, that Cerebrolysin, you're going to notice anything different from Cerebrolysin and Ipamorelin. But then when you take the Pepsi challenge and you're a person, a man or woman, and you use both, Every person's going to come back and say, oh no, man, I felt Ipamorelin way more than I felt Cerebrolysin. I slept so much deeper and I had more fat loss and blah, blah, blah. I mean, I've done this with thousands of people. So it's really weird because if you're in the compound space and you get your peptides from a doctor, they're always going to recommend Cerebrolysin over Ipamorelin. But I always tell them, hey, IPA is just as readily found in compounders. Demand that you get IPA over Cerma. And so that's just my opinion. Again, will people get some effect from Cerebrolysin? Yes, but will they get a much more pronounced effect from IPA and less, if there are sides? And we haven't talked about that. We should probably talk about that, but I don't think that you're going to notice the effects of CERM like you will with IPA.
Yeah. I think that's the one people are just most aware of just because of the compound pharmacy can still.
That's the number one question I get from people on the internet when they ask me. They're like, hey, dude, why is Cerebrolysin not in your book? And I tell them, I said, because Ipamorelin is that much better and they're biochemically almost the same molecule.
So SS31, I know that you were.
It's so next to melanotan 1, it's now my favorite peptide. And I've only been using SS31 since June, but I use it religiously. It's now part of my travel stack. I take it with me. Dude, it's insane.
I'm definitely interested in this one. Anything that enhances like the energy production without giving me that. Like I'm pretty sensitive to caffeine without giving me that wired.
You won't feel
feeling.
anything from it.
Yeah, that's what's so crazy. That's what I like.
And I think you and Gentry, when you guys start microdosing retatrutide and throwing in SS31 with it, I think you guys are going to be like, what is going on? So this is what I'll say about SS31. It makes everything else that you do or take better. And it doesn't do it in a noticeably, it's like, it's not even subtle. It just happens. Like you start feeling stronger in the gym. You have more reps. The same weight that you're lifting, you get 2 or 3 more reps and you're like, what the hell? I'm not eating more. I'm not on anything else. What's going on? The energetic effect of SS31, because again, it's enhancing all of the other things. And again, it's super firepower. It's super firepower for your mitochondria. You just notice, you feel better on it. And I don't take it every day. I mean, I literally, it's part of my, when I do a shot of Monday, Wednesday, Friday, that's what's in, it's always in there. And I probably literally, dude, I'm taking nothing. Like, in the books and in the science, they want you to take a much more heroic dosage of it, And again, for people that are mitochondrial deficient, I can see that. But for people like us, it's just a tiny microdose.
Also, there's no reason because, anytime you can get the best or the largest effect from something by taking the minimal dose, that's really the way to do it.
Always. Yeah. Always. And the guys at Transcend, who I'm not supporters of, but again, if you're getting hormones from somebody, it's better than not being hormonally optimized. But obviously they support, or Mind Pump is like a big, giant nationwide corporate sponsor for them. They had Sal on SS31 starting in like May, and he was the one that told me, he's like, hey bro, there's something going on with this peptide. And I had known about it, but I was like, oh, and I'll start taking it. I was like, holy shit, dude, you're right. But he said that it made everything else that he would use just better. He felt stronger in the gym. He felt, oh, and by the way, I didn't say this. It's a sexual enhancer too. And again, it makes sense, right? Because if it's optimizing your mitochondria, it's giving you more energy. Why would you not have more performance in the bedroom?
Gentry's going to be really mad about that one. I don't think I need any more enhancements. So I know we talked about TB500 already. That was in the tease. Tesamorelin. I know.
Let's talk about Tessa.
Yeah, that sounds like that's probably one of the better growth hormone releasing peptides.
It's the number one growth hormone releasing peptide. So to give a history, so Tesamorelin is also a FDA approved drug. It's called Egrifta. And it was made in, I want to say 1999 to 2000. And it was created for men that have HIV. And men that have HIV, which are obviously, they have an AIDS diagnosis. And by the way, I never knew this, but you can actually have HIV and not have AIDS.
Yeah,
did you know that?
Yeah, I did.
So anyway, it basically, so what happens when you have HIV? You're taking this, there's like 3 or 4 drugs they take to maintain their health. And the two of the drugs, and I don't know the names, it's not important, but they cause a side effect of what is called lipodystrophy. And lipodystrophy is this like super hard visceral fat that accumulates in the middle. And so they created a Egrifta to inject into that hard visceral body fat, and it breaks it up. So obviously, say 8 years ago, 7 years ago, it was theorized by people in the longevity anti-aging space. And obviously they were getting this stuff from AIDS patients to inject it in the belly if you have belly fat. And dude, it's like a hot knife through butter for belly fat. So for me and you, we don't have belly fat, not going to do much. But for a guy that has belly fat, it's incredible because it literally cuts through belly fat better than any other peptide.
But then does it also improve hormone? Is that what it's for?
So it does a lot of things. There's really no science that shows that it improves endocrine function or improves, sexual function or anything like that. What it does do, and what the studies do show, it does improve well-being.
Yeah, I meant to say growth hormone, so it
Yeah,
doesn't.
yeah. Oh no, it's a massive growth hormone bolus. The other problem with it, and it's not a problem, is because it's so strong, it causes receptor sensitivity,
Okay.
attenuation fast. So you get, I mean, I tell guys this all the time, like, because I know guys with belly fat and they're like, dude, I just want to lose my belly fat. I'm ripped. I have a 4-pack, but I got belly fat right here. I can't get rid of it. I'm like, okay, you need to take 1.5 milligrams at night and 1.5 milligrams in the morning. And the clinical dose is 2 milligrams. So I'm giving them a 1 milligram increase. But that'll cut through gut fat faster than anything. But dude, I'm not joking. After 5 weeks, it stops working.
Okay.
It literally will make you hold water, something fierce.
So
Stop using it as soon as you start holding water on.
as far as because I think Gentry, she either ordered that or Ipamorelin, but I think it was this. And so if she's looking for growth hormone,
It's too strong for women. But there's a lot of women that use it. But again, because it's designed to cut through belly fat, if you're a woman and you don't have belly fat, it's pointless.
she doesn't really. Yeah, it's not really much. So
I mean,
she needs to
Ipa
take
is way better.
That's what she needs to take for longevity, skin.
Dude, my wife. So I met my wife in 2012. This is a true story. I've told this a couple of times, and I got her on Ipamorelin. Now she obviously has a really amazing genetics, and she works hard and trains hard, and I always tell that. But I literally, after 4 months of her being on Ipamorelin, her entire family went after me and said, "You got her on steroids. Who are you to do this?" Because she was coming out of a divorce, and they all, of course, all sided with the ex, and I was the new guy and whatever. But like, her body changed so dramatically that people were like, "Monica," I mean, she was again fit, but it just dramatically melted fat off of her places that she never could get rid of. And so they were all just like, "What is going on?" And she told them, she's like, "I take Ipamorelin. My boyfriend got me on this peptide, and her youngest son, who became estranged, and now we're all good and everything. But like he took a picture on a camera, on a cell phone with a camera, and showed it to the ex, and because it was in our refrigerator, and it was just like, she's on steroids and all this stuff." But I mean,
not knowing about
dude,
it.
it does profound body composition modulation for women who are in their like mid 30s to late 30s or even early 40s. Again, when they still have healthy IGF-1 levels, it really dramatically loses fat in stubborn areas.
Okay, sounds good. I'll let her know because I don't. It was one of the two she ordered, so I'll let her know.
I mean, dude, Tessa's going to work, and I know women that take it, but like I said, it's so good at getting rid of belly fat that I would just tell you, it's strong and it doesn't work as long.
It doesn't really have.
No, so I mean, like, just get her on Epa. She can easily do an 8 to 10 week cycle.
Yeah, that's more. I think that's what she was looking for.
For sure.
For some reason, she ordered this.
Yeah,
one.
for sure.
Vesilute is a bioregulator.
Yeah, so Vesilute is incredible. So we also wrote an article about this. So this is a peptide that also works on the vascular system and the venous architecture. So basically, if you use Vesilute, or I never pronounce that word.
Yeah,
right
Vesilute, it kind of sounds.
It will optimize blood flow. So dramatically optimize blood flow. So like you will become much more efficient at, so you know what, dude, it might be good for you for headaches. Because it really does, it cleanses arterial and vascular, and I would say, capillary pathways. So basically what happens as we get older is all of our pathways, our vascular pathways, get full of gook. And it's again, free oxidative waste, free oxyradicals, and senescent cells. And so this helps with getting rid of the senescent cells. And just really just cleansing the pathways.
Is there any downside to having too much blood flow? Like if
I mean, the downside is like what you and I were talking about last night. Like if you're using, and this is a whole separate rabbit hole, but if you're using injectable testosterone, your blood is becoming heavily oxygenated, which is a good thing, but only if you are also doing cardio and lifting to get rid of the exchange of that thicker blood, which, as you know, many men don't. They think they take testosterone, or even women, and they don't exercise, they don't do cardiovascular exercise, and then the blood becomes too thick and they become lethargic. A lot of people have experienced that. But other than that, it's always good to have more oxygenated blood and to have cleanse or what I would say is just more optimized vascular pathways.
VIP, last one,
dude. VIP. So vasointestinal protective peptide is an amazing peptide. That's also a ShamWow peptide, and save that for when you're really sick. So check this out. So in the early stages of COVID, when they were diagnosing people, when they didn't even know what COVID was, and they were intubating people and killing them, right? Because they thought that it was some sort of airway disease, and they didn't realize that it was actually starving the heme and the red blood cells. And so when they were put these older people on intubators, they're dead, right? They found out, like, this is mid now 2021, when they started understanding a lot better, when in the few rare circumstances that there were doctors that would use VIP in people that had broken airways or just compromised airways, it would cure them. It would instantly make them better and make them feel better. So then, of course, allopathic medicine found about it and banned VIP. Like, they wouldn't let anybody bring it into hospitals. But I mean, I've heard secondhand, of course, from other physicians that gave their patients that had like very advanced forms of COVID or multi-stage levels of COVID, that VIP cleared up their COVID in less than 24 hours. So it is a very, very, very powerful, just call it like an airway, an oxygen, a capillary. Like, it basically stimulates oxygen and carbon dioxide in free flow in such profound ways that, like, if you have a blocked airway or a really infected sinus passageway, it'll get rid of all of it. It's incredible. It's an amazing peptide, but again, don't use it until you have to.
Yeah.
You know, like, I definitely know people that use VIP when they're sick, and it's like, it's overdoing it. You want to save that when you really need it, like when it's a situation of last resort.
It is a lot of information.
Yeah, dude. Of
and
course.
Then people have a bunch of questions, and then, you know, once you start hearing about a couple different ones or what to use, what not to use, hear something, you might want to go back to it and, you know, get the bits and pieces. And, you know, me personally, like, they'll talk about something for an hour and then they go into like 2 or 3 peptides pretty deep.
And then they don't cover
anything else. And then, which is not bad. It's just like, for me, it's like, man, you know, I want to know about these 3 from these people. And so, you know, I appreciate you like going into really good detail, and I'm sure the listeners going to appreciate it too, of kind of A to Z on what's available, what's outdated, what people aren't really using anymore. And so I think it was really good information, and, you know, we'll have to have you back on one day to talk about like deep into some of these ones that are super effective and just go into more detail on that side. And then definitely want to get the NAD guy on, and, you know, maybe a couple of these.
I mean, I got so many people to recommend to you, but I think one thing we didn't cover, which you and I talked about last night, and I always forget to say this, and I'm just glad that my brain is BDNF simulated to say, is that for everyone who's listening to this podcast, it's most important when you start using peptides to find out first if you have a hormonal deficiency. Because peptides, again, as signaling molecules, signaling agents, fractionated proteins, they're all going to work better in a, let's just say your hormones are the orchestra, the peptides are the symphony, right? So if the orchestra is dialed in and the big, you know, bass movers and everything that really is tuning the, just call it the actual frequency, is dialed, you're going to get much better effect from peptides. So I think the biggest mistake that people make is they're 45, they're 55, they're even older. They're not hormonally optimized, and they don't even know that they should be hormonally optimized. And they start on peptides right away, and they don't get the same effect.
It's going to be a miracle cure.
Yes. And the truth is again, the body can just call the body a very, very intricate symphony. If you don't have your testosterone, your thyroid, and your pancreas, which would be metformin, dialed in or somewhat optimized, the peptides as signaling molecules are not going to give you the full response that you would when you are. So again, if you're an older person, and sadly, Sean, younger people have hormonal deficiencies now too, as you know, because the environment is so contaminated. So it's always highly important, you know, to really do this right, to make sure that you get your blood work done. You're working with like Sean's recommended doctors, or just somebody who understands this, who can find out if you have a hormonal deficiency, and then and only then, you know, address that. If you're addressing it, there's nothing to stop you from also using peptides at the same time.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice, because a lot of people may, you know, go, oh, this is my symptom, and then they go straight to the peptide.
Exactly.
And, you know, maybe it helps a little bit, but they're not getting the full benefit.
They don't get, and that's the majority of people. And dude, I know you're going to think this is crazy, but there's still a huge percentage of people that say peptides don't do shit, and they don't work. And it's like, dude, what are you talking about? And then you find it again, the person's a metabolic emergency. They're not changing their lifestyle habits. They're not living insulin controlled. They're hormonally totally dysregulated. And look, women that are hormonally dysregulated, which is the majority of women over 45. Yes. Women that have had 2 kids, their thyroid is damaged, they have thyroid malfunction or dysfunction or dysregulation. They start on a Ipamorelin, or they start on a BPC, or they start on, you know, one base peptide, and they're like, it doesn't work for me. And then you ask, you'll drill deeper and you get some disclosure and you're like, well, what do you mean it doesn't work for you? And then they tell you all those things and you're like, dude, like you've got a lot of other things going on. You can't
Yeah.
expect these small signaling molecules or, messenger transfers to like do what you expected to do, especially when you have all these other issues. So, just to end it, just make sure that you understand whether or not you have a hormone deficiency. And if you do, again, work with a really awesome doctor, work with Sean's folks, to address that. And then at the same time, while you're addressing that, you can start on peptides.
And I think that is the goal for us, is like, we really want to try to educate people, because again, I was always healthy, I thought. And then until I met the right doctors and found the right people, that's what really changed my life. Because before thought I was just doing the right thing. I was maybe going off some fad stuff on the internet. And again, everybody's different. But once I did all of those optimization things and got everything right, everything else just fell into place and worked so much better once I was educated. And then now I started on the peptides. I'm sure if I would have taken NAD 15 years ago, probably would have maybe just done something for a little while, but wouldn't have had the effect that I had today.
The systemic one that you have now. And that's true. And what's crazy, dude, is like this podcast has been amazing. I'm blessed to have met you last night. And of course,
Yeah, no, it was great.
to be exposed to your work. And I appreciate it. And I'm of course going to, return the favor. But dude, we're still such a small subset of society. Like I think about like how I talk about peptides and how much I know about all this. And it's like, dude, 90% of the universe has no idea. Yesterday, I told you about that. I was on that call with that peptide doctor, but before that, I was on with this massive PR agency chick in New York City, very famous PR firm. And I'm talking to her, and she's a really smart person. And it's like, I'm speaking Chinese. Like you start talking about this to average people and they don't even know what you're talking about. I mean, when you and I talk about BPC, right, and we know what it does, right? Like you can't even explain that to an average person because they think you're talking like you're making shit up. They don't get it, right? Because they've never been exposed to it. They don't use it. They don't have friends or colleagues or family that are using it. So it's like I said, it's like you're speaking a second language to them. So I think to wrap all of this, it's like we're in the infancy of all of this right now. Like we are truly the pioneers bringing this to, the small audiences, holistically to the whole planet. But like, imagine where it goes. I mean, so it's like, that's why I told you last night, like it's up to us to make sure that this information gets out in a way that people can digest and understand and most importantly relate to. Because if you and I were just talking technical science junk on this podcast, which we did not do, people just tune us out. Because they're like, what are you talking about? Like, I don't even know what it means anyway, right? So it's like, that's where I see the real advance is that this is going to be in the next 2 to 3 to 5 and even 10 years, this is going to be medicine.
Yeah.
And I call this, again, I didn't even say this, but I call peptides quantum healing. Because this is where we're going. We're going into an environment where people want to understand how to be healed. They don't want like Rockefeller medicines. They don't want their doctor to stick something up their colon. You know what I mean? They want to be able to take ownership for this and do it themselves.
It's funny how some of the medicines started out as a prescription, but they were peptides, right? And then so people, I think, have a misconception of like, oh, well, it's natural. Maybe it doesn't work, or, I didn't feel anything. But, when they think about it, oh, it's pharmaceutical and you get it prescribed, then it works.
And it has to work.
Yeah. And it's funny because, just like you said, metformin, it's like, oh, it's a plant. And if you would have just came out in the beginning and maybe told people that, nobody would have maybe took it serious. But then it's a prescription. There was all this study behind it. And they saw the benefit. Then the patent finally expired. So then you could really get some information out there and get benefit out there, and have other people actually make it for a fair price.
Exactly.
Is what's usually the problem with most pharmaceutical medications is when they come out, the price is so high. People don't even have access to them anyways. And it's a racket for the insurance companies. And that's a whole nother topic that when I talk to doctors, I mean, it's just, we're in such a weird place that I hope maybe we can get through, and I don't know how to fix it. I mean, it's complicated.
Dude, end of life, just to add, because I was telling you about, my wife's dad just died. We buried him last Wednesday, but I mean, he lived 7 months beyond what they expected him to live. And the insurance industry, the subrogation insurance industry for health, healthcare benefits. I mean, dude, that's how it's built. The actuary tables are built with, by the time they're 65 to 70, they either die from the side effects of the medications they're on, or they run out of money because the experimental medications are so expensive that insurance doesn't cover it. So it's almost demonic, but it's truly scandalous, like how it all works out. And then you also see like the cottage industry that goes into them making containers for them to color code their pills. Cause bro, the average 65-year-old person's taking 25 pills a day. Meds, not supplements like you and I are taking.
Pharmaceutical
meds.
prescriptions.
And that's how they die. They die of the side effects from the, again, call them the petroleum distillate allopathic meds, because they end up breaking up, and in the body, they cause side effects in other systems. And that's why bioregulators and peptides are so awesome, because they're tissue specific and they don't cause those side effects. So that's where, again, we have this giant, call it divergence, where you either are, I mean, this is the way to look at it. Like, you're either like, here's my $40 copayment. This is all I can afford, and I want to go down to the sick care pathway. Or you're like us, and you're like, no, I don't even care about my benefits. I just have that for catastrophic reasons, but I have my choice, cash pay, and I want to work with the best and the brightest.
Yep. Well, hopefully this information will help some people. It is an exciting time of like kind of to see where it's going to go. And I do think it's still really early. And, sadly, the people that do find out about peptides and some of this other stuff, not sadly, but there are people that have already made all these lifestyle changes, and they go, there's more. Is there more? Is there more? They feel so good. They're like, wait, I can even feel better. I can perform better. I can think better. And so that's usually who keeps going down this path. And so hopefully more mainstream people will find out about them and realize, once you start leading a healthy lifestyle, there's all this other added stuff that you can do to just like really improve your life and live a good life till you're 80, 90, 100 years old,
120.
Yeah, I think we're right there. My kids are definitely going to be in like the golden age of,
yeah, dude, no doubt.
We're going to have worked through all this weird pharmaceutical mess. I think at that time, it's going to take a long time.
I think we're 20 to 30 years out from a real true golden age, where people literally can just choose
real
what
society
they want.
changed.
Exactly.
And you don't grow up with processed foods and all this stuff where you're already sick by the time you're 20 years old.
Dude, our kids are not going to be sitting in front of the TV. That's for sure.
No. All right, man. Well, thanks, Jay. I really appreciate you coming.
I appreciate you.
It was awesome,
amazing.
man.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. It was awesome. You're welcome.